Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere cold. Colder than your ex's texts. Colder than a medieval church pew at dawn. We're slipping into the frostbitten nightmare that was winter in the Middle Ages. Spoiler, it was not a winter wonderland. Unless your idea of wonder is wondering if you'll freeze, starve, or get eaten by wolves. Before you wrap yourself in blankets and pretend your radiator is a dragon, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Only if this sort of historical misery warms your heart. And drop a comment with your location and the temperature where you are. Bonus points if it's below freezing, or below average life expectancy for a 14th century peasant. Alright. Dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soothing white noise, and maybe pull your blanket just a little tighter, because tonight we're going to spend a medieval winter together. And, spoiler, it's going to hurt. Congratulations! You've just opened your eyes in the year 1312. It's morning, probably. There's no clock, no sunbeam through the window, because there's no window. Just the vague suggestion of daylight bleeding in through the gaps between your roof's dead grass. You're lying on a pile of mouldy straw in what might technically qualify as a bed if your standards are low enough. There's a thin wool blanket on top of you. Thin in the way a wet napkin is technically a towel. And it's doing its best to convince your body that hypothermia is a team sport. Spoiler, it's winning. Your name doesn't matter. No one wrote it down. You're not a knight, a scholar, or even a known drunk at the local tavern. You're a peasant, a glorified farm appendage in human shape. One of thousands born into a world where you till the land, pay taxes, and freeze to death in alphabetical order. You try to move, but your joints protest like rusted door hinges. You're 23 years old, which in medieval peasant math makes you a grizzled veteran of life. You've survived at least 4 winters, 6 fevers, and 1 near-death encounter with a slightly aggressive goat. That puts you firmly in the category of experienced. Or at least not dead yet. The air inside your hut is colder than it is outside somehow. It smells like boiled onions, wet hay, and the faint but unmistakable perfume of goat farts. You share this one-room hut with your mother, your uncle, 2 siblings, 3 chickens, and a pig named Snotnose. Privacy is a myth. Warmth is a memory. You attempt to stretch. Mistake number 1. The blanket slips off your shoulder, instantly exposing your skin to the morning air, which is about as welcoming as a slap with a frozen trout. Your breath comes out in little clouds. You consider going back to sleep, but there's no sleep when your toes have gone on strike, and your spine feels like it's trying to unalive itself out of protest. There is no mattress, just some straw and despair. No fireplace in the room, just a sad pit of ashes in the centre of the floor where the fire used to be. It died sometime in the night. It gave up before you did. You're not sure if you're angry at it or jealous. Maybe both. Outside, the wind howls like a banshee with arthritis. It seeps through the cracks in the walls, slides onto warped wooden door, and presses against your exposed skin with the loving tenderness of a tax collector. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster coughs. Yes, coughs. Even the animals have respiratory issues. You try to pull your wool tunic tighter, but it's stiff from last night's sweat and last month's grime. It smells like something died inside it. Something probably did. You shift it, and a flea hops off your collar like it's abandoning ship. Wise move. Your hands are numb. You can't tell if your fingers are still attached. You consider checking, but that would involve moving them. Better not to know. This is the medieval version of waking up refreshed. You're alive, you're breathing, and none of your limbs have blackened and fallen off. Yet. You glance around. Your mother is already awake, muttering to herself while chewing on a piece of stale bread that's somehow both rock hard and damp. Your uncle is still snoring, possibly dead. It's hard to tell. Your siblings are huddled together like terrified rodents, and one of the chickens has decided your ankle is a nest. You accept this. You're too cold to argue. You look down at your feet. Big mistake. Your toes are the colour of regret. Your toenails resemble ancient coins, and one of them might be missing. No point worrying. Frostbite is the great equaliser. Rich or poor, toes are optional. You wonder if today's the day your soul gives up before your body does. But no, not yet. First, you have to get through another delightful round of, will this be the winter that finally breaks me? Because in medieval Europe, waking up isn't the beginning of the day. It's just the next phase of suffering. You finally sit up. Slowly. Painfully. Like a dying tree trying to grow backwards. Every joint in your body clicks, pops and groans as if it too has something to complain about. You're 23 years old, but feel 93. That's normal. Peasant aging is more of a speed run. Your back screams, your neck protests. Your knees are no longer knees. They're just sacks of crunchy twine and regret. You attempt to stand, but realise your feet are welded to the frozen dirt floor. Not metaphorically. The condensation from your breath, your sweat, and the general atmospheric dampness has partially iced your soles to the ground. You peel them off like freezer-burned chicken. The hut you live in isn't so much a house as it is a slightly organised pile of regrets. It was built by someone with exactly 0 architectural training and less than 1 functioning tool. The walls are timber and mud, or at least they were. Now they're mostly frost and disappointment. The roof? Thatched straw, technically waterproof, assuming you define proof as still dripping a little. There are no windows, just small holes plugged with rags. The rags don't block the cold. They merely slow it down so it can savour the moment as it stabs its way in. The cold doesn't just enter. It moves in, gets comfortable, and starts laying plans for emotional warfare. The single door creaks open when the wind pushes it. Not when someone opens it. The door has lost the will to resist. A draught snakes through the hut and instantly transforms the interior climate from near death to murder-suicide. Everyone inside flinches, except your uncle. He might actually be dead. Still hard to tell. The pig snorts in its sleep. Snotnose is probably the warmest creature here. His body heat is the only thing keeping your brother from turning into a literal peasant popsicle. In this house, livestock doubles as heating infrastructure. And emotional support. You shuffle to the hearth, or what's left of it. A pit of soot, the ashes are cold. You poke around, hoping for an ember, a spark, anything, but the fire is gone. Like your dignity, like your last decent pair of socks. All that remains is a half-burnt stick and some aggressively judgmental smoke stains. You think about rekindling the fire, but that would require kindling and fuel and a functioning will to live. The wood pile outside is empty, again. Technically, there's plenty of wood in the forest, but guess what? The forest belongs to the Lord. You take a branch without permission, and suddenly it's not theft, it's treason. And treason gets your fingers removed with a spoon. So no, you don't gather firewood. You gather disappointment and rub your hands together for warmth that doesn't arrive. Let's talk about your clothes, or rather, your singular piece of clothing. You're wearing your one outfit, a tunic made from roughly woven wool that feels like wearing punishment. It's itchy, damp, and smells faintly of mildew and onions. There are stains. You don't know what caused them. You don't ask. Or underneath, if you're lucky, a linen undershirt. If you're not lucky, and you aren't, you're going commando. In winter. In wool. It's like sandpaper pyjamas that were also cursed. You consider putting on your shoes, then remember you don't have any. Or rather, you did, but they disintegrated last winter after a particularly ambitious walk through a Ford latrine path. Now you just wrap your feet in cloth and pretend they're boots. They're not. They're damp rags pretending to be optimism. The cold bites at your fingers. Your nose runs like it's trying to escape. Your ears feel like someone is gently nibbling them off with ice cubes. And your breath? It fogs the air in front of you. Your one artistic contribution to the household. You try to remember the last time you felt warm. Not just lukewarm. Not just less frozen. Actually warm. Maybe it was last midsummer, when you stood too close to the forge during sheep shearing. Maybe it was never. Maybe warmth is a fairy tale the nobility tells to peasant children so they sleep through the frost. You glance around again. The entire family is stirring. Everyone's awake, but no one is really alive. They move like the barely thawed, a sluggish mass of bones and obligations. Nobody speaks. There's nothing to say. No one wants to waste the heat from their breath on conversation. The baby is crying. Not a loud cry, just a whimper. She's too cold for full volume. She's wrapped in a blanket that used to be white, then grey, now brown. Probably haunted. Your mother picks her up, but her hands are shaking so badly the child wobbles like a chilled pudding. Your father's missing again. Probably gone to the Lord's estate, begging for firewood or mercy or both. He might come back with a bundle of twigs. He might come back with a bruise. He might not come back at all. Winter does that. Outside it snowed again. Of course it did. The snow here is not fluffy or magical. It's wet, heavy, and personal. It clings to everything. Your roof, your soul, your future. It has a grudge. You step outside for a moment. The cold slaps you in the face like you owe it money. The wind picks up. It whispers things like, "You're going to die out here," but you're too numb to care. Your breath becomes mist. The air smells of smoke, dung, and desperation. You look around the village. A collection of sad huts, smoke trails, and footprints that end too soon. You glance up at the sky. It's not even pretending to be friendly. Just a dull, wet grey, like a goose's underbelly if it had depression. You squint into the distance and see old Tom trudging through the snow. He's dragging a sled made from a broken fence and a dream. On the sled, frozen cabbages, maybe, or rocks, you can't tell. Either way, he's crying. Not from emotion, just because his eyes froze. You wonder if you'll make it to spring. Not know, just wonder. Because wondering is free, and you're a peasant in winter. Free is all you've got. You head back inside, because standing outside means choosing between frostbite and being asked by your neighbour if he can borrow your last handful of fire ash. It's not even firewood anymore. People are borrowing the concept of fire. Back in your hut, your siblings have started their morning ritual, shivering while chewing on old bread and arguing about whose fault it is that the dog died last week. The dog didn't actually die from anything dramatic. It just froze one night while sleeping too far from the pig. That's what you get for seeking personal space in the 14th century. Fatal consequences. You sit beside the hearth and poke the ashes again. There's still no ember. You could cry, but tears require moisture. Your body's on strict rations. Even your sadness is dehydrated. You don't speak much in winter. Talking takes breath. Breath makes steam. Steam makes condensation. And condensation makes ice. Everything makes ice. Time makes ice. Emotion makes ice. There are icicles forming on your soul. And you're always tired, not didn't sleep well tired, not need coffee tired, medieval peasant tired, which is a special kind of exhaustion that exists only when your body is still growing from youth, breaking down from labour, and freezing in place all at once. There is no morning routine. There is no routine at all, unless you count do exactly what you did yesterday and try not to perish. You don't journal, you don't meditate, and you certainly don't stretch. The last time you tried to touch your toes, your hamstrings filed a formal complaint. You scratch your head absently, and 3 lice flee like they just heard the church bells ring. That's another thing. You're never alone. Not spiritually, not physically, not parasitically. You are a communal being, whether you like it or not. You share everything. Blankets, bites, breath. You're not a person with space. You're a body in a pile of other bodies, trying to occupy enough room to retain basic function. Every morning begins with a census of what still works. Can you move your fingers? Can you wiggle your toes? Can you still feel your ears? If yes, it's a win. If no, maybe they'll come back. Maybe they'll fall off. Medieval medicine is basically a game of biological roulette. There's no mirror. You've never actually seen yourself. Maybe in the reflection of a frozen puddle once, but that was last summer. Now your face is a mystery. A cold, flaky, probably asymmetrical mystery. You have no last name, no birthday, no written record. Your entire existence is a rumour. If you died right now, no one outside this hut would know, or care. And if they did, it would only be to ask if they could have your turnips. You stand up and grab your outer cloak, which is just your tunic again, but flipped inside out for variety. It's damp, not wet, just eternally, cosmically damp, like it remembers every fog it's ever touched. You pull it on like a second skin that never liked you to begin with. Let's talk about your hair. Not because it matters, but because it doesn't. It hasn't been washed since last Pentecost. And even then, it was more of a symbolic rinse with prayer water than a cleansing. You've never had a haircut, only hair loss from stress and bugs. Your scalp is a thatch roof for fleas. They hold meetings there. You tie your cloak shut with a bit of twine that once held up your trousers, which are now just wool sacks shaped like defeat. You wrap your feet in more cloth, slightly newer cloth this time, which means less crusty, still cursed. Your body is not so much dressed as it is wrapped in layers of unresolved trauma. You walk over to the wooden wall, lean on it, and immediately regret it. A draft pours in through the gaps like the house itself is whispering, "Why bother?" You patch the hole with a bit of straw and hope the wind doesn't notice. You think about leaving. Not leaving the hut, leaving here. Going somewhere warmer, kinder. Some place where the sun comes out and stays, where water doesn't have texture. But that's not an option. Your world is 10 miles wide and full of snow. The next village is a half-day's walk through ice, sleet, and what might be bandits. You don't even know if they have better food, or if they'd let you in. They probably wouldn't. They're peasants too. Even if you wanted to leave, you wouldn't make it far. Your shoes, if you had any, would fall apart. Your coat is a joke. Your endurance is laughable. You'd die 2 miles in and be eaten by a crow with confidence issues. You're not a traveller. You're not a hero. You're a statistic. A flesh-coloured dot on some monk's parchment. You used to dream, once, when you were younger, before your bones ached like they were trying to escape. You dreamed of warmth, of comfort, of owning a goat with soft ears and a name. Now you just dream of not being cold for a full hour. And speaking of dreams, last night's was a good one. In it, you were somewhere indoors. Somewhere with heat. A giant fire. Not just a hearth, but a whole wall of flames. You were wrapped in something thick and dry. People served you food without sneezing on it. You woke up smiling. Then your breath fogged the air, and you realised your nose was bleeding from the cold. That's winter in medieval Europe. Even your dreams freeze. There's a moment, just a moment, when you sit still, wrapped in wool and fatigue, where the cold doesn't hurt anymore. It just is. It stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like the natural state of being. And that's the most dangerous part. Because once the cold stops bothering you, it owns you. You stare at the hearth, at the pit where the fire used to be, and realise that it looks a lot like your heart. Not metaphorically, physically. Cold, grey, covered in soot, and possibly harbouring a rat. You wouldn't blame it. You'd hide in there too if you had the option. You pull your knees to your chest and listen. Not for sounds, but for signs. Is anyone outside? Has the rooster crowed again? Has the neighbour's door opened? Is the world still happening? Or has the village just quietly frozen into a medieval snow globe? You hope someone else has lit a fire. Not because you'll share in it. No, because the smoke might drift this way, and you could inhale 5 seconds of warmth before your lungs give up and file for seasonal retirement. You weren't born in winter, but it's adopted you. You don't remember your first snow, because snow isn't special here. It's not a holiday, it's not a postcard. It's a 6-month-long eviction notice served by the sky. It falls and keeps falling until it covers every mistake, every memory, every grave. Your village disappears under it. Your childhood disappears under it. You do too. Your mother calls you. Not loudly. Loudness is reserved for those with energy. She murmurs your name, or what passes for your name. A 3-syllable breath, smoothed down by decades of dirt and fatigue. She wants you to go check the grain store. You don't want to. You really don't want to. But medieval winters don't allow refusal. There's no no here. There's do and die. Often both. So you nod, stand up, bones cracking like thin ice, and push the door open. The cold doesn't rush in, it strolls. Casually. Like it already owns the place. It greets your face with a soft slap and whispers, "Back so soon?" The path to the grain hut is barely visible. Snow drifts pile up like lazy barricades, and your bare hands turn red the moment they hit open air. You shuffle forward, not walking, just dragging your body through the powdered resistance. You think about the grain hut and hope the rats haven't gotten there first. Or worse, that they have, and they were hungry. Because if the rats have eaten more than their share, you'll have to tell your mother, and she'll cry, quietly, like she always does. And then you'll all eat a smaller meal, and go to bed colder. and the baby will get sicker, and maybe not wake up next time. You don't say any of this out loud. Saying it out loud gives it weight, makes it real, and there's already too much reality here. It's stacked in corners like firewood you don't have. You reach the hut. The door creaks open with the dramatic flair of a ghost with a limp. Inside, darkness, a single bag of oats, and something scurrying. It might be a rat, might be Hope leaving. Either way, you don't check. You pick up the bag. It's half empty, or half full, or exactly enough to get you through 5 more meals if no one breathes too hard while chewing. You drag it back through the snow, wind clawing at your cheeks, your teeth aching from the temperature. Not a toothache, just temperature teeth. You weren't aware that bone could freeze, but now you know. Back at the hut, your brother is stirring the morning meal. It's not breakfast, it's just the meal. 1 pot, same pot. Always. Pottage, if you're being generous. Sludge, if you're being honest. A thick, mealy swamp of root scraps and week-old flavour remnants warmed over the world's saddest spark of fire. You watch him stir. The ladle creaks against the side of the pot. There's a rhythm to it, like the sound of dying dreams being gently folded into edible submission. You spoon a bit into your mouth. It tastes like warmth almost remembered. It's not enough to satisfy you. Just enough to remind your stomach that hunger still exists. The baby cries again. Her cheeks are red, but not in the cute way. In the "this will be in the next century's medical journal" kind of way. Your mother bundles her tighter and rocks her. Your sister hums. A low, tuneless noise. Not for the baby, for herself. Because humming is free, and it's the only thing here that isn't cold. You look around. This is your life. Not just your morning. Your life. Wake, freeze, chew, ache, repeat. There is no adventure. No destiny. No chosen one. The only thing you've been chosen for is weather-based punishment. You once heard a story from a travelling monk about a boy who became a knight. About firelit halls and banquets and fur-lined cloaks. About warm beds and loyal friends and glory. You laughed at the time. Not because it was funny, but because your teeth were falling out and you didn't want to cry in front of your sister. No one in this village will ever be a knight. You'll never hold a sword, never ride a horse, never eat meat without consequences. You are born in the snow, and you will likely die in it, anonymously, face down, half covered, like a forgotten offering to the winter gods. And yet, you get up again. Not because you want to, because that's what you do. You move, you exist, you survive. That's all you are now. Not a name, not a soul, just a vessel that refuses to stop breathing. A peasant in the grip of a season that doesn't recognise you as a person, only as a problem to be erased. Welcome to your identity. You're the cold now. It lives in you. It owns you. And unless spring comes soon, you're not sure you'll remember how to be anything else. Let's talk about your home, or more accurately, your barely upright frost coffin with aspirations of being a structure. Calling it a house would be wildly optimistic, like calling a pile of wet hay a mattress, or calling your cousin Joff emotionally stable. It's made of timber, but not in the warm, rustic way. These logs are not hand-hewn or lovingly stacked. They were dragged from the forest, hacked into rough shapes by a half-blind neighbour, and slapped together with frozen mud and curses. The result is less of a building and more of a suggestion. The walls don't keep heat in, they don't even keep air out. They just stand there, shivering slightly, holding up a thatched roof that sags with the weight of every snowflake that lands like it's out for revenge. The roof is straw, supposedly waterproof straw. But over the years, it's become mostly mould and regret. It leaks in 5 places when it rains, 10 when it snows, and perpetually when you're trying to sleep. And inside is an environment all its own. A special climate zone known as Despair Tundra. It is colder inside your hut than it is outside. Not colder by accident. Colder by design. Because every breath exhaled indoors gets trapped, freezes against the inside walls, and becomes next week's frost pattern. There is no insulation. The concept hasn't been invented. Your version of insulation is dried animal dung pressed between the timbers. It smells like it sounds, like you've built your dreams in a compost heap and then set them gently on fire. The dirt floor is exactly that. Dirt, cold, damp, and sometimes moving. Not metaphorically, actually moving. Worms live here? Beetles. The occasional rodent looking for warmth and finding only disappointment. The floor has no ambition. It does not aspire to comfort. It aspires only to stay beneath you. Sometimes, when it freezes at night, you can hear the crackle under your toes. That's not ice. That's the ground itself trying to escape its role in this performance. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof if you're lucky. And by hole, I mean gap between beams that was never fixed because someone fell off trying to patch it with a goat bladder in 1309. The smoke from your fire, assuming there's a fire, curls around your ceiling like a lazy ghost that smells like burnt cabbage and long dead ambition. It stings your eyes, but it's warm, so you welcome it like an abusive old friend. You share this single room miracle of mediocrity with your entire family, your animals, and every parasite on the social ladder. There are no rooms, no corners to escape to, no doors to shut, just space. Open, raw, judgmental space filled with snoring, wheezing, coughing, farting, scratching, praying, chewing, and existential dread. You know how many people live here? You've lost count. Some of them are technically relatives. Some of them might just be travellers who never left. One of them might be dead. You're afraid to check. It's warmer to let him lie still and assume he's meditating. And there's the smell. Oh, the smell. It's not one smell. It's layers. Like a lasagna of sorrow. First layer. Sweat. Not gym sweat. Survival sweat. The kind that comes from hauling frozen water in a bucket for 4 hours and then hugging a pig for warmth. Next layer? Smoke. The fire burns wet wood, and your ventilation system is a small hole that birds occasionally clog with twigs, so the entire hut smells like the inside of a burnt sock left in a puddle. Then there's livestock, a charming blend of animal breath, dried manure, wet fur, and a chicken who thinks your sock is a latrine. Add to that the stew pot, which has been simmering for 8 days without pause, growing new life forms and slowly replacing your will to eat with the will to scream. And finally, mould. It's everywhere. On the walls, on the cloth, possibly on the baby. It grows in patterns. It has ambition. Some of it glows. You think about naming it. You're probably breathing it in. This rotting, frozen, suffocating shoebox is your entire environment. You were born here. You will die here. Your blood, your sweat, your warmth, they all sink into this dirt and stay here. Forever. You don't leave a legacy. You leave a smell. And it only gets worse when the snow comes. Because snow isn't white and soft here. It's dirty. Aggressive. It doesn't fall. It attacks. It shows up sideways, driven by wind that screams across the hills and finds the holes in your roof like it's conducting a targeted assassination. When it melts, it drips, constantly, onto your bed, onto your food, onto your sister's forehead. It freezes again by morning, turning the inside of your house into an ice cave with furniture made of garbage. You wake up with frost on your eyebrows and dreams of fire that end with your blanket catching on imaginary flames. Your furniture is wood, warped, cracked, uneven. The table leans dramatically to one side, like it's about to leave. The chairs? There are no chairs. You sit on logs or crates, or your own numb backside. Your bedding is straw, constantly damp, constantly moving, and often home to creatures that didn't ask permission to exist. And your possessions? You don't have possessions. You have burdens with sentimental value. A chipped cup. A spoon so warped it only works if you eat left-handed and lean slightly to the right. A single pair of pants shared by two brothers. A comb with 4 teeth. A prayer book no one can read, but everyone touches in the hope that holiness will soak in through osmosis. You don't decorate. There's no concept of aesthetic. The only style is still standing. A cloth on the wall might have been a curtain, or a burial shroud, you don't ask. A carved figure on the shelf could be a saint or a stick that looked like your grandmother. Either way, it's spiritual now. And the air, the very air, is thick, thick with smoke, with steam from boiled turnips, with body heat, with desperation. You breathe it like soup. You exhale it like confession. Every breath you take is a gamble between oxygen and mildew. Your entire world, all of it, fits inside these 4 shaking, rotting walls. Outside there are more huts, identical, equally sad, built in the same way, crammed with the same number of defeated humans. The village is a series of rectangles trying not to collapse under the weight of shared futility. The paths between houses are mud, snow, and excrement. Children slip and fall and laugh, because they don't know they're supposed to hate this yet. Dogs bark. Crows gather. The wind blows. And through it all, your environment, the wood, the dirt, the straw, watches you. It knows you. It knows your warmth. It waits for it. Because the moment you stop fighting to stay warm, the moment you stop moving, breathing, caring, it takes you. And no one will notice. Because the frost has already made a space for you. You step outside. Not because you want to. No one in their right mind wants to go outside in medieval winter. You do it because you have to. The most common reason for doing anything when you're a peasant. Obligation backed by frostbite. Outside, the world greets you not with beauty, not with majesty, but with a slap. The cold air doesn't simply touch your skin, it cuts. It reaches into your clothes like it knows your name and wants to settle a debt. It crawls up your sleeves, into your nose, under your tunic, between your ribs, and says, "Hello, I'm here to remind you that comfort is a sin." The ground crunches under your feet, not with satisfying snow, but with frozen sludge. The paths between huts are packed with ice, mud, manure, and secrets. It's slippery, unpredictable, and constantly trying to remove your spine from your body in one sharp fall. There are no roads, just paths. And the paths aren't planned. They're worn into existence by years of people walking the same miserable route to the same miserable field for the same miserable wage, not dying. The snow's everywhere, and it's not pristine. This isn't storybook snow. It's peasant snow, mixed with soot, ash, straw, and whatever your neighbour's goat coughed up last night. It piles in strange places, melts into puddles that immediately refreeze into traps, and disguises every hole, rock, and pile of yesterday's chamber pot discharge. That's right. The street is also the sewer. You forgot for a moment. Easy to do when the snow covers everything in a unifying sheet of white lies. You pass by other huts. They're like yours. Leaning, wheezing, collapsing inward under the weight of seasonal neglect. Some have smoke drifting from the roof. Lucky. Others don't. You try not to think about what that means. You hear coughing from every direction. A symphony of lung failure. Deep, hacking, wet coughs. No one covers their mouth. What would be the point? Germ theory doesn't exist, and everyone already shares the same diseases like uncomfortable family heirlooms. You head toward the well, or rather, the general area where the well is supposed to be. It's buried under snow, a mound with a wooden frame poking out like the ribs of a dead beast. You dig with your hands, shivering, the icy crust cutting your knuckles. Eventually you hit the lid. It's frozen shut. You chip at it with a rock. It doesn't budge. You kick it. Bad idea. Your toe screams, your balance wobbles, and suddenly you're in the snow, staring up at the pale sky like a soul waiting for instructions. You lie there for a moment, not because it's comfortable, but because movement feels like a betrayal of whatever part of you gave up first. Eventually you rise. The well doesn't open. That means no water today. Not unless someone melts snow. Which they won't, because there's barely enough firewood to melt your own emotions. You trudge toward the edge of the village. Fields stretch beyond the last row of huts. Vast, empty, frozen. A place where crops used to grow. Now it's just flat land covered in snow and sorrow. A graveyard for wheat. The fence is broken in 3 places. One section fell under the weight of last week's ice storm. No one's fixed it. No one has the tools or the will. If livestock wandered out, they're probably frozen stiff halfway to the woods, now part of the landscape. The forest looms in the distance. Dark, dense, full of wood you're not allowed to touch. That's the Lord's forest. Taking a branch is theft. Taking firewood is execution, if someone's feeling especially feudal. You once saw a man tied to a post for taking pine cones. Pine cones. The only warmth he got was from the laughter of the guards. The village square is just a clearing. Snow-covered, icy, dominated by a communal bread oven that hasn't been lit in weeks. There's no flour to bake with, and even if there were, someone used the firewood to warm a dying lamb. Priorities, you guess. In summer, the square might host markets, songs, even gossip. In winter, it hosts silence. The kind of silence that buzzes in your ears like a warning. You see old Marek. He's sitting on a stump, staring into the snow. He's not moving. You're not sure if he's thinking or freezing. Maybe both. He was once a smith. Then he lost 3 fingers to frostbite. Now he just watches time die around him. The wind picks up. You pull your cloak tighter, but it doesn't help. It's not a real cloak. It's a glorified rug with holes. It flaps in the wind like it's trying to escape your body. You envy it. The church tower rises above the huts. Stone, grey, lifeless. It doesn't offer comfort, it offers judgment. The bell rings to mark the hour. Or the death. Or both. Bells don't care what they're ringing for. You pass a cart half buried in snow. It hasn't moved since harvest. The wheel cracked. No one repaired it. No one could repair it. Tools rust faster than they're made. The blacksmith's forge hasn't been hot in weeks. He's out of coal. Or maybe hope. Everything outside exists in a state of polite collapse. The barns sag. The fences lean. The trees creak. Every part of the landscape groans under the weight of winter, and the weight of being ignored. You wonder how anything survives. Not just people, animals, plants. Hope. How does hope survive? Then you remember, it doesn't. Not really. Hope is a summer thing. Winter in medieval Europe doesn't allow such luxuries. It takes everything that grows and locks it under ice. If you want warmth, you steal it. If you want life, you barter your own. You don't dream. You endure. You hunch forward and walk through the cold until your knees give out, or your soul does. This is your environment. It's not a place. It's a sentence. And there's no pardon coming. Let's talk about tools. You don't have many. In fact, the word tools is doing a lot of work here. You have objects, implements, things that scrape, poke, smash, and eventually break. Calling them tools implies they were made with a purpose beyond get this miserable job done without dying. Take your spade, for example. It's not a spade. It's a wooden board nailed to a stick. The nails are bent. The stick is cracked. It's held together by a strip of leather that used to be your shoe, which used to be your father's shoe, which used to be a cow. The cycle of life. You use it to dig out the latrine pit. You use it to break ice on the water trough. You use it to bury dead chickens, scoop ash, or stir the compost heap. It's not a tool. It's your third hand. And it's colder than betrayal. Your scythe? Dull. Not in the metaphorical sense. Dull like it couldn't cut butter on a warm day. You've sharpened it with a rock so many times that it now has a personality, resentful, lazy, and slightly curved from emotional damage. There's no blacksmith to fix it. Not anymore. His anvil cracked during the freeze last January, and his forge has been silent ever since. He now fixes pots with twine and grief. You asked him once for a new nail. He laughed so hard he coughed up blood. Inside your home, you have a knife. Singular. It's not for eating. It's for everything. Cooking, cutting rope, picking your teeth, occasionally defending your soup from aggressive neighbours. You keep it under your bedding, not because it's valuable, but because it's the only thing in your house that's both sharp and trusted. Your bucket is leaking. Everything leaks here. Walls, roofs, tools, people. The bucket's been patched 3 times with pitch, twice with wax, and once with a hopeful prayer. It squeals when you fill it, and like it resents holding liquid. So do your hands. Let's not forget the water barrel, assuming you're lucky enough to have one. It's half full of ice. Ice that tastes like smoke and dirt. You broke through it this morning with your forehead because the stick was too brittle and snapped in 2. Congratulations. You're now a medieval icebreaker, minus the ship, or dignity. Then there's the cooking pot, the sacred vessel, made of iron, bent, blackened, and occasionally haunted. It's the only item in your life treated with actual reverence. It stays on the fire pit, filled with a stew that never fully empties, only evolves. Like a slow-cooked monster. You don't clean it. Cleaning removes flavour, and flavour is earned. Around the village, everyone's tools look the same. Patched, passed down, pitiful. There are no spares, no backups. If someone's tool breaks, they either borrow yours or die of the thing they were trying to fix. Your neighbour once traded a pair of gloves for a working hammer. Not because he needed to build something, because he wanted to break apart a frozen turnip without using his forehead again. Medieval innovation. There's a loom in the corner of your hut. It's broken, of course. The thread froze and snapped last month, and no one has wool to spare anyway. It just sits there now. A large wooden reminder that warm clothing is a fantasy you're not allowed to dream. Let's move to daily rituals. The morning starts with breath. fogged, bitter, involuntary. Then coughing. Not light coughing. Deep, terrifying, lung-rattling concerts of bodily resistance. Everyone coughs. If you're not coughing, people worry. Are you hiding something? Are you already dead? Next comes the water fight. Not a fun water fight. A real one. The fight to find water, carry it, boil it, keep it from freezing. It's a daily panic. No one drinks cold water, not because they don't want to, but because cold water doesn't exist. It's either frozen or boiling. There is no middle ground, like medieval politics. After water comes heat, which is to say, pretending you have heat. Firewood is a legend passed down by the elders. If you have any, it's damp, or illegal, or cursed. You burn anything now. Twigs, fence parts, dried dung, old shoe soles. Once your sister burned a religious pamphlet. It warmed your hands and your sense of rebellion. Feeding animals comes next. The animals are also freezing, also starving. They look at you with judgment in their eyes. Your pig grunts like it's writing a letter of complaint. The chickens no longer lay eggs. They've unionized. The goat is missing patches of fur and possibly plotting your downfall. And then, breakfast, which is just a continuation of dinner, which was a continuation of lunch, which is really just pottage, again, forever. It's the food equivalent of living in a rut, except the rut is edible and occasionally has hair in it. You eat in silence. Not because you're reverent, but because speaking means letting warmth out of your mouth. And you need every calorie of heat to survive the next task, which is going outside again. Why? To work, or walk, or check traps, or visit someone dying, or bury someone dead. The reasons blur. The outcome doesn't. The village doesn't have a meeting place. The village is the meeting place. Everyone exists in shared misery. You greet people with nods, grunts, and the occasional, "Still here, huh?" No one smiles. Smiles are for people with lips that haven't cracked into bloody maps. Children don't play, not in winter. They huddle, or cry, or gather ice in a game called What Will Break Next. Relationships are formed in proximity and preserved by inertia. You don't choose who to love. You choose who won't steal your fire at night. That's romance. That's courtship. That's medieval Tinder. Proximity. Pluh. Mutual frostbite. You do everything as a group, not out of love, out of necessity. If you gather snow alone, you die. If you dig alone, you freeze. If you walk alone, you vanish. So you gather. You trudge together. Talk without speaking. Nod without meaning. Breathe without hope. The environment has forced you to merge. No one is an individual in winter. You are one body, extended across 10 huts and 12 surnames. When someone dies, the rest don't mourn. They absorb the work. That's all grief is here, redistributed suffering. And when someone's fire goes out, you feel it. The cold spreads. The frost creeps. The dark thickens. Not metaphorically, physically, literally. Cold is the only communal emotion here, and it is always expanding. At some point you forget what warmth feels like, not because you're numb. Numbness is temporary. Numbness still remembers pain, still hopes. No, this is something deeper. A hollowing. A quiet settling into the truth that warmth might not come back. That maybe it never really existed. Just something people talked about once, like dragons or fairness. You used to believe in seasons. Spring, summer, harvest, rest, a cycle, a rhythm. Something natural. But winter doesn't feel like a season anymore. It feels like truth. The others? Myths, fables, lies you tell children to keep them from screaming through the night. You try to remember summer. Not the word, the feeling. Sunlight, sweat, that slow, hazy buzz of insects and heat. But your brain can't conjure it. It reaches into the memory vault and finds only snowdrifts. You try to recall the smell of flowers and get smoke, ash, and animal breath instead. Your body has adapted, but at a cost. Your fingertips are always cold now. Not blue, not black, just quietly dead inside. Your joints ache not from injury, but from persistence, like old wood that bends in storms, but never quite returns to its shape. Your skin is rough, not just dirty, textured by existence, like bark, like stone. Your nails crack. Your lips bleed. You don't bother healing. Bandages are luxuries. Pain is background noise. Your sleep is shallow and short. The cold doesn't let you rest. It taps your shoulder every hour, asking, "Still alive?" And if you don't answer, it takes a toe in exchange. The roof above your head groans every time the wind blows. You start naming the leaks. The big one near your bed is called Gregory. The drip over the stew pot is Lucy. You whisper to them when the nights get too long. They don't reply, but at least they're consistent. Sometimes the frost creeps in so far, the walls sparkle. You wake to glittering wood. For a moment it's beautiful, and then you realise it's the same frost that claimed your cousin's lungs 2 winters ago. Outside, the world is flattened. Snow has erased all landmarks. The paths are gone, the trees blur together. The fields stretch into fog, and then into nothing. You're surrounded by a landscape that refuses to acknowledge your presence. You're unseen by the very world you live in. Birds vanish. Animals hide. Even the crows seem to stop flying. You hear silence. A real, devouring silence. And it presses on your chest like an invisible stone. The forest looks closer each day. Not physically, emotionally. It feels like it's watching. Waiting. You tell yourself not to go in. You don't want firewood that badly. You don't want to join the others. The ones who went looking for warmth and never came back. You've stopped keeping track of days. Not because you're lazy, because there's nothing to count toward. There's no feast on the horizon, no harvest, no new season. Just cold, slightly different cold, and then a sudden cold that kills. The calendar hangs by the hearth. Not a paper calendar. A carved stick, each day scratched in with a bone pick. You haven't scratched in 2 weeks, or maybe more. You don't remember. The stick doesn't matter. It can't get you firewood. It can't bring back the sun. Time used to move. Now it pools like stagnant water. You wade through it day by day, chest deep in frost and fatigue, hoping the next bend brings change, knowing it won't. You look at your family and see it in them too. Your sister hums, but it's tuneless now. Her eyes stare past the wall. Your brother's laugh is shorter. Not gone, just clipped. Like laughter is rationed now. Even the pig has stopped grunting. Snot-nose lies still most days, only shifting when someone drops a piece of frozen carrot on his side. The environment has gotten inside of you, into your mind, your speech, your bones. You speak in short sentences. Long ones cost breath. You gesture more than you talk. You nod instead of reply. Words are like heat, best saved for emergency. And dreams? Those are changing too. You used to dream of running, of trees, of rain, of dancing even. Once you dreamt of kissing someone in a field. You don't remember who, or why. Just warmth, mouth to mouth, shared heat. Now your dreams are quieter. A bowl of warm soup, a fire that doesn't go out, a blanket without holes. No grand adventure, no escape, just relief. Your fantasies are survival based now. You imagine waking up without shaking. You imagine your toes not burning when they thaw. You imagine being able to sit without your spine audibly protesting. You dream of nothing happening. A day with no new frostbite, no new cracks in the roof, no new funerals whispered over an unmarked patch of ground too cold to dig. This is what existence becomes in medieval winter. A negotiation between you and the wind, between your breath and the smoke, between your body and the floorboards. You give a little, it takes a lot, you give more. It takes everything. And one day you realise you're not waiting for spring anymore. You're waiting to forget that spring ever mattered. Because winter isn't something you endure. It's something you become. The sun is technically up, but you wouldn't know it. The light outside isn't cheerful or warm. It's grey, muted, like daylight seen through sadness. The kind of light that makes your body feel heavier, like even photons are too tired to show up properly. You haven't eaten yet. You're not hungry, exactly. Not in the way you remember hunger from childhood. Hunger isn't an event anymore. It's a setting. You exist in a constant state of underfed fog. Your body doesn't expect satisfaction. It just hopes the next bite is warm and not moving. But food can wait. Because winter doesn't give you the luxury of starting slow. The chores begin before your knees have even convinced your brain they still work. You shift your weight. The stiffness in your joints is its own language, ancient, sharp, and unwilling to negotiate. First task, water. The animals need it, the family needs it, the pot needs it. Everything needs water, which is unfortunate, because water is frozen. You take the bucket and head for the trough. You don't need to check it. You already know it's iced over, because it's always iced over, because everything is, because of course it is. You reach the trough and stare at it like an enemy. The surface is solid, opaque, and cruel. You take the butt end of a stick and bash it. Nothing. You bash again. A crack forms, mocking you. Eventually, after several minutes and the sacrifice of feeling in 3 fingers, you break through. The water beneath is frigid, dark, and alive with the kind of cold that could file a lawsuit. You dip your bucket in, knowing full well it will freeze again before you reach the hut. You move quickly, not because it helps, but because it gives the illusion of control. Back in the hut, you pour what's left of the water into the pot, wipe your hands on your tunic, and glance at the fire. Still alive? Barely. You feed it the last of the straw scraps and pray it doesn't die like your optimism. Then it's time to deal with the animals. The chickens are offended by your existence. They cluck like you've personally betrayed them. One pecks your boot, another pecks your hand. It's less feeding time and more combat with feathers. You scatter a few shriveled grains, which they ignore in protest. They wanted warmth. You gave them crumbs. The betrayal is personal. The goat is next. He looks at you with eyes that have seen war. You try to milk him, but it's too cold. The milk refuses. The udder is basically an icicle with regrets. He kicks at you half-heartedly. You don't blame him. You used to have more animals. Another goat, 2 more chickens, a lamb that made weird noises when it sneezed. They're all gone now. Sold, lost, or just stopped moving one day. You didn't ask why. You buried them. Probably. Unless the ground was too hard that week. In which case, you left them in the forest and hoped the wolves were feeling helpful. After the animals comes firewood. This is where the real labour begins. the kind that bends your spine and your soul in equal measure. There is no wood pile. That's a rich man's word. There is a damp stack of twigs you stole from the edge of the forest, hidden under a tarp made from old cloaks and desperate decisions. You dig through it like a scavenger. Most of it is wet, some of it is frozen together. One piece is suspiciously soft. You throw that one back. You gather what you can carry and drag it back to the hut. You don't walk, you haul. Every step is an argument between your body and the ice beneath your feet. Your hands are numb again. That's fine. They're always numb. You keep going. You reach the hut, toss the bundle by the fire, and fall to your knees like someone finishing a pilgrimage, except no one welcomes you. No one applauds. The fire hisses, unimpressed. You rise, slowly. You used to rise quickly. Now you're afraid to. The last time you stood up too fast, your knee made a sound like a wooden spoon snapping in half, and you limped for a week. You didn't tell anyone. No one has time for someone else's pain. Next chore, latrine. Your house doesn't have one, of course it doesn't. It has a bucket. The bucket lives in the corner. It is the most cursed item in the hut. When it fills, someone has to empty it. Today it's your turn. You carry it outside, eyes watering from the smell. You walk carefully, slowly, because one slip on the icy path, and you'll be baptized in your entire family's digestive history. You reach the edge of the yard, the dumping pit. It's already frozen over. You smash the surface with a stick. You pour. It steams. You gag. You move on. Some days, you skip this part. Not because you want to, because the weather makes it impossible. That's when you toss it into the woods, or the neighbour's yard, or wherever feels far enough that guilt can't reach you. Then comes wood chopping. If you're lucky enough to have logs, big if, you chop them with a dull axe. If not, you split fence posts, broken tools or old furniture. You once burned a stool your grandfather carved. It cracked in the fire like it was screaming. You told yourself it was the wind. You chop. You stack. You ache. You bleed. You don't stop. Because stopping means cold. Cold means death. So you keep going. And through all of this, every hour, every task, your body never gets warm. You sweat sometimes, yes? But it's not a helpful sweat. It's the kind that chills you even more the second you pause. There is no comfort in this labour. No satisfaction, just repetition. You do not complete chores. You only delay their return. And when you look at the pile of firewood, or the fed animals, or the steaming bucket, you don't feel pride. You feel time passing. And you ask yourself the same question every winter morning. How long can I keep this up? You never answer, because winter doesn't care about answers. Winter just keeps going. And so do you. You don't get a choice about working. Work is not optional. It's not a career path. You don't browse listings. You don't weigh the pros and cons. You wake up, you breathe cold air, and you continue the labour your ancestors began, because they never stopped long enough to die in peace. And today, like most days, that labour includes work for the Lord. Yes, Him. The man who owns everything, including the field, your time, your home, your dignity, and technically your goat, though you stopped telling him about Snotnose 2 winters ago. He lives in a manor house half a mile away, a drafty stone rectangle with actual windows and actual glass in them. Glass. Imagine that. You get dressed for the journey. Not because you want to look presentable. There is no presentable in peasant winter fashion. but because walking across the snow with bare legs is a fast track to losing your reproductive rights via frostbite. You double wrap your tunic, shove a handful of straw into your shoes, and tie a scarf around your face. It's not for warmth. It's to protect your skin from the wind's unsolicited exfoliation attempts. The walk to the fields is slow. Your legs ache from yesterday, and the day before, and every day since you could walk. Your knees no longer bend, they negotiate. The path is slippery, uneven, and full of choices. All bad. You pass other peasants along the way. No one talks. Everyone walks with their heads down, like they're hoping the cold won't notice them today. Eventually, you reach the edge of the Lord's land, which is of course most of the land. Everything here belongs to someone else. The best fields, the best trees, the stone fences that haven't crumbled into poetry. All his. And today, the task is clearing snow from access paths so the Lord's carts can still roll when spring arrives. This would make more sense if the carts weren't frozen in place and the wheels weren't cracked beyond use. But logic is a summer luxury. You grab a shovel. Not your shovel, his. He provides them. Generously. Except they're worn smooth, splintered at the handle, and so dull you could serve dinner off the blade. You start digging. The snow is packed like rock, crusted over with days of melt, refreeze, melt, refreeze. Every stab of the shovel sends shocks into your shoulders. Every lift makes your back twitch. You try to pace yourself, but pacing implies control. You don't control anything. Not your limbs, not your tasks, not even your thoughts. Nearby, another peasant slips. She goes down hard, landing on the icy ruts with a crack that echoes like a sermon. No one rushes to help. Not because they don't care, because they have all fallen too. They know the pattern. Lay still, curse God, stand up slowly, return to work. That's the protocol. You can feel the cold creep through your boots again. The straw insulation is already damp. Your toes begin to sting, then fade. You try to wiggle them, just to confirm they still exist. They do. Barely. By mid-morning, the wind picks up. It doesn't whistle. It shrieks. It screams down from the hills like it's hunting. You pull your cloak tighter. It flaps open. You tie it again. It fights you. Everything fights you. Even your own clothes have become enemies in this war against the elements. And then, as if the gods themselves needed a laugh, freezing rain starts. Light at first, then heavier. The kind that slices sideways. It soaks into your tunic and freezes on contact, turning your back into a mobile glacier. Your shovel sticks in the snow. You yank it free. It catches. The handle snaps. You're left with a shard of wood and a handful of curses that aren't even creative anymore. You go to the tool cart. It's empty. Of course it is. The steward tells you to wait. So you stand, shivering, shaking, chewing your lip to stay awake. He returns half an hour later with another shovel that's somehow worse. You use it anyway. You have no dignity left to lose. By the time the sun is at its highest point, which is a generous term for slightly less grey sky, your body is soaked, your hands are blistered, and your spine has made 4 separate threats of mutiny. You get no break. There is no bell, no lunch hour, no union. If you stop working, someone notices. And if the steward notices, he reports it. And if he reports it, your family gets less grain this month, or fewer eggs, or an extra day of labour as punishment. So you keep going. You've done this before. Last winter. The one before. Every year. Always the same. Sometimes you think, maybe this is the year your body quits first. Sometimes you hope it is, second when the work finally ends, when the steward waves a dismissive hand, and the carts are done being prepared for a spring that won't come for 2 more months, you don't feel relief. You feel emptiness. Your hands hang limp at your sides. Your face is raw from wind. Your breath rattles. You start the long walk back to your hut, but your legs don't move right anymore. They don't lift, they drag. You pass the same people on the way back. No one speaks still. A few cough. One man is crying, quietly. You pretend not to notice. When you reach the hut, the door doesn't creak. It groans. Like even it is tired of this. You stumble in, collapse onto the dirt floor, and feel the fire, such as it is, sting your frozen skin. You don't eat, you don't talk. You lie there. Because there's nothing to say. Because this isn't the end of the day. It's just the middle part. Because next, you need to help mend the roof, and patch the wall, and check the traps, and salt the meat, and dig the new hole for what might become a grave, just in case. Work never ends here. Labour is not something you do. It's what you are. There's a moment every evening when the work stops. Not because it's finished, but because your body forces the issue. Your muscles lock. Your eyes blur. Your chest won't lift anymore. And for one long, terrible second, you ask yourself, what if I just lay here and didn't get up? And the scary part isn't that it might kill you, it's that it sounds fine. You don't think in dreams anymore, not even in language, just reactions. You wake, you move, you lift, you carry, you freeze, you drop. You're a shovel now, a bucket, a walking pair of hands that exist to convert pain into fuel, and fuel into labour. You used to tell yourself stories while you worked, little fables to pass the time. Now there is no time to pass, only moments to survive. The rhythm of labour has replaced the rhythm of thought. You don't think of the future, because the future implies change, and nothing here changes. The snow stays, the cold stays, the hunger stays. You stay, not out of will, but because the effort to leave would be just another job. And you already have too many. Let's talk about your body, not metaphorically, literally. Your hands are cracked, the skin peels in little sheets. Some parts bleed. Some parts don't bleed anymore. They just split open like bark. You wear cloth wrappings that were once clean. Now they're stiff, brown, they smell like old meat. You don't change them often. You can't. You need them more than comfort. You need them to grip. Your shoulders are knots, not tight, not sore. Knots, hardened clumps of sinew and salt and regret. When you raise your arms to chop wood, you feel a tug behind your neck, like something is tearing. You keep going anyway. Because what's the alternative? Warmth, laughter, a day off, your back is a battlefield, your knees are unreliable narrators, your feet, raw, blistered, frozen, sometimes bleeding. You don't look at them anymore. You walk by, feel. If the ground feels squishy, it's probably blood. Yours. Don't think about it. Your face is windburned, your lips peel. Your teeth ache from clenching. Not because you're angry. You're just bracing. Always bracing. For the next task. For the next hour. For the next blow. And still, no one thanks you. That's the thing. You work like this every day, and no one thanks you. Not the steward. Not the village elder. Not your family. Not even yourself. Gratitude is too expensive here. Praise doesn't exist. No one is proud of you for not freezing to death. That's just expected. You once helped carry a neighbour's body 3 miles through snowdrifts so they could be buried with their family. You were 12. No one mentioned it again. The next morning you fetched water like nothing had happened. Because here, death is Tuesday, survival is Monday, and there's no time for Wednesday. Even your skills feel useless. You're strong. Great. So is the ox. And he doesn't get a birthday. You can sew a little, bake a little, fix thatch, mend tools, but you're never good at anything, because there's no time to be good. Only time to be adequate, fast and silent. You don't master a craft. You fend off collapse. And when you finally sit at the end of the day, if you're lucky enough to sit, your body still vibrates. Your fingers twitch. Your breath is shallow. Your brain still echoes with the clink of iron and the crunch of frozen dirt under your heel. You try to rest, but rest isn't relaxing. Rest is absence. An empty, buzzing void where thoughts used to be. You lie on your straw mat, wrapped in your wool sack of a blanket, staring at the rafters, trying not to think about tomorrow. But your brain is already rehearsing it, already preparing, already bending itself back into labour shape. You wonder if this is what animals feel. Not pets, not horses in stables. Animals, the ones who work or die, who eat what they're given, sleep where they can, and blink slowly into a world that doesn't care they exist. You wonder if you've become one. You used to sing while you worked, quietly, just to yourself. Rhymes your mother taught you. Little tunes about saints and stars and sheep that ran away and found heaven. Now your voice is dry. You hum once, a single note. Then your throat catches. You cough. You stop. Music doesn't belong here anymore. It's like flowers. It exists somewhere else. In summer. In fantasy. In books you'll never read. And then there's your mind. That's the scariest part. Because your mind is not just tired, it's changing, reshaping itself to survive in a space that punishes emotion. You don't feel joy. You don't feel sorrow. You feel usefulness. That's your emotional metric now. Did I carry enough? Did I dig fast enough? Did I break the ice, patch the wall, mend the bag, fetch the child, stir the pot, chop the wood, feed the fire? If yes, I'm safe. If no, someone else suffers. Someone else hungers. Someone else dies. So you do the work, not because it matters, but because not doing it would matter more. You are not a person anymore. You are maintenance. You are the thing that keeps the roof on, the fire lit, the bucket empty, the pot full, the goat alive. You are the glue. And glue doesn't get days off. There's a strange thing that happens when you've worked yourself past exhaustion, past pain, past even thoughts. And still, the tasks remain. You keep moving, but you're not moving you. You're watching someone else move through you. Someone with your face, your hands, your slow, dragging gait. Someone who doesn't ask questions anymore. They just wake, and move, and return to the fire as a shell with function. You're still conscious, but you don't feel present. You're a collection of old motions now, a routine stitched together by memory loss and obligation. And the scariest part? It feels normal. You don't even notice how much you've disappeared. Not all at once. Just slowly, inch by inch. A sliver of soul lost every time you say, I'll rest after this next chore. But after never comes, because something always needs doing. The fire is low, the trough is frozen, the ox is coughing, the baby's crying. The door hinge broke again. The wall is leaking again. The roof just whispered soon again. There's always a leak. Always a squeak. Always a weak spot that's about to fail. And it's your job to catch it before it breaks. Because if it breaks, something dies. A chicken. A child. A piece of what little order you've managed to duct tape together using ash and willpower. And that's the most brutal truth of winter labour. You're not maintaining comfort, you're preventing collapse. Every chore is a crisis waiting to happen. You don't chop wood to stay warm. You chop it so the baby doesn't freeze mid-sleep. You don't patch the wall to keep the wind out. You do it so the rats don't get in. You don't boil water to drink it. You do it so it doesn't poison the one person you actually like in the hut. Nothing you do is for you. Everything you do is to hold back death for one more night. And even then, sometimes death wins anyway. You've seen it happen. The neighbour who slipped on the ice carrying dung and cracked her head like an egg. The boy who lost 3 fingers fetching snow in a storm and bled into his own scarf because no one had thread. The grandfather who finally sat down by the fire and never stood back up. No pain, no scream, just stillness. Like his body knew it was done being used. And when they go, when someone dies, it's not an event. Not here. Not in winter. It's just a redistribution of tasks. If your father dies, you carry his water. If your sister dies, you stir the pot and mind the fire. If the neighbour dies, you check their traps, quietly, and maybe keep one rabbit if no one notices. You don't grieve, you reassign. You triage existence like a general in a war you never enlisted in. And if someone breaks down, mentally, physically, spiritually, you keep going. Not because you're strong, but because you're afraid of what happens if you're the one who stops next. There's no honour in collapse, just inconvenience. And you don't want to be remembered as the one who left everyone else with more work, even when you're aching, even when you're limping, even when your teeth won't stop aching, and your vision won't stop shaking, and your thoughts won't stay in your skull for more than 6 seconds at a time. You keep going, because stopping would mean someone else has to start in your place, and you love them too much to do that to them. Or maybe not. Maybe you just don't know how to stop. Maybe you've forgotten. You used to have interests, hobbies, little joys. You used to whistle when you stirred the stew. You used to fix things well, not just badly. You used to care about the shape of your handwriting. You used to remember birthdays. Now you don't even remember the year. You used to look up at the stars at night and name the constellations. Now you just look for frost on the rafters. You used to make jokes about the firewood pile getting smaller. Now you just count the logs and hope it's enough for 3 more days. You used to say things like, maybe when winter's over. Now you don't finish that sentence. Because there is no when winter's over. There was only if I make it to the next day. And this is what labour becomes. Not duty, not purpose, not even sacrifice. Just the thing you do so the world doesn't collapse entirely. And you'll do it until you physically can't. And then someone else will do it for you. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember your name. But probably not. Because names fade in this kind of cold. Only the work remains. Here's a fun medieval winter truth. It's not just the weather that's trying to kill you. It's also your place in society. And spoiler, your place is at the bottom. Below the dogs, below the pigs, possibly below the lice, depending on how the local steward feels about peasant hygiene this week. You are a peasant. That's not a job. That's a caste. A class. A frozen social sentence carved into the frozen ground at birth. You were born to labour, to suffer, and to look slightly downward when someone with real boots walks past. You do not rise in this world. There's no promotion. There's no working your way up. There's just you, cold, filthy, disposable, and them, the people who wear shoes in winter and expect you to bow while freezing. Let's begin with the nobility, the lords and ladies whose land you live on, whose names you don't say aloud, and whose permission you need to gather a twig that has been dead for 3 weeks. Your lord has a fire, a real one, large, fed with whole logs, possibly cedar. He has a hearth big enough to roast animals inside of it. Not rats, not turnips, actual animals. He sits near it in a chair made of wood that hasn't splintered and fabric that isn't fungus coloured. He wears fur, and not fur he found. Fur he owns. Fox, wolf, sometimes even bear. You know what you wear? Wet wool and obligation. When the Lord rides through the village, on a horse of course, you step aside. Not because you're polite, because if you don't, you're hit with a stick, or a boot, or the idea that your place is beneath hoof level. You bow. You lower your eyes. You mutter something respectful. If you say too little, you're insolent. If you say too much, you're suspicious. If you say nothing, you're punished. It's a game, and you always lose. Now let's talk about his steward, the man who actually speaks to you, gives orders, and writes down your failures in a tiny book he guards like it contains the secret to not being awful. He is slightly less rich than the Lord, but infinitely more cruel. Because he's close enough to power to taste it, but still insecure enough to ruin your life for fun. He inspects your grain. He counts your chickens. He asks why your firewood pile is smaller this year, and if your answers aren't good enough, your taxes go up, your work hours extend, your family loses the rights to the stream, or the path, or the goats. Yes, your right to use a stream can be revoked. That's feudalism. You don't own land. You borrow land from people who inherited it, from people who murdered someone else for it. Your hut, not yours. Your field, not yours. Your life, technically yours. Functionally rented. If the Lord decides he needs more grain, you plant extra. If he decides he needs soldiers, you lose your brother to conscription. If he wants timber, your roof becomes a gift, or a tax, or a loyalty offering. And through it all, you're expected to be grateful, humble, obedient. You are nothing if not obedient. Questioning the system isn't rebellion, it's heresy. Speaking up, that's dangerous. Dangerous in a dragged by your hair through the snow to the village square and whipped for others to watch kind of way. That happened to a man named Edric. He asked why he owed more grain this year when his yield was smaller. They said he was interfering with divine order. He now walks with a limp and never speaks. The humiliation doesn't stop at punishment. It's built into every interaction. When you address the priest, you kneel. When you address the bailiff, you bow. When you meet someone with more goats than you nod slightly and look ashamed. This is the hierarchy, and winter makes it worse. In summer, you can at least pretend, and the sun warms everyone, the fields are busy, people move around, there's distraction, illusion, but in winter, there's nothing to do but compare suffering, and someone always suffers less than you. You see the smoke coming from the manor house and think, they're warm. You hear laughter from behind glass and think, they're fed. You hear a lute playing and think, they have time to play music while I boil moss. And you feel something worse than anger. You feel shame. Shame for being cold, shame for being poor, shame for existing in a space you didn't choose, but now have to justify. You begin to believe what they believe. that your station is deserved, that your hunger is moral, that your misery is ordained, that you were meant for this, and that, more than the cold, is what breaks you. Because it's not just the snow on your roof or the frost in your boots, it's the frozen hierarchy, a system built to make sure you never feel warmth where it matters most. In your spine, in your name, in the idea that you're equal. You're not. Not here. Not in winter. And not in the eyes of those who drink wine while you burn your last chair for heat. Let's start with what you wear. Because in medieval winter, clothing is class. You don't wear clothes, you wrap yourself in guilt, in stitched together scraps. In whatever wool wasn't already nibbled by moths, or stolen by rats, or taken as payment by the steward 2 summers ago. Your tunic is brown. Not because you like brown, because everything is brown eventually. Once white linen turns brown, blue wool turns brown. Even your skin begins to take on a brown-grey hue after weeks without a full washing. Brown is not a colour here. It's an inevitability. You have no shoes, not real ones. You have wrappings, leather soles tied with cord and faith. Your toes stick out. You stuff straw into them like you're building a thatch roof on your own foot. When it rains and then freezes, which it always does, the straw becomes a sponge, then a brick. You walk on frozen hay, each step a crunch of humiliation and chilblains. Your head is bare. Hoods are a luxury. Hats even more so. You sometimes tie an old rag around your scalp and pretend it helps. It doesn't. And if someone of higher rank passes by, you remove it anyway. You expose your frostbitten ears, your broken scalp, your lice, your raw, cracked skin, because humility requires visibility. Humility must be seen. It must be noticed. You don't just submit. You must do so visibly, loudly, ritually. And there are rules. When the steward enters the square, you bow. When the priest approaches, you kneel. When a tax collector arrives on horseback, you take off your cap, avert your eyes, and offer a crumb of your dignity before he even asks. You don't question the rules, because the rules aren't written down. They're lived. They're passed from mouth to ear, generation to generation, like curses disguised as customs. Don't speak until spoken to. Don't walk in the same tracks as the reeve. Don't let your eyes linger on the manor. Don't wear blue if the Baron's daughter is visiting. Each one is absurd, but each one is deadly serious, because breaking them means punishment. Let's talk about that. Punishment in medieval winter is its own kind of horror, because the cold makes everything worse. Stealing bread in summer might get you whipped. Stealing bread in winter gets you whipped, then left outside overnight. One man was caught cutting a sapling from the Lord Forest, just a thin, crooked branch to use as a walking stick. They didn't just fine him. They shaved his head, marched him through the village, then tied him to the pillory in the centre square for 2 full days. It was January. He lost 3 fingers, and his dignity, and part of his mind. Now he hums to himself behind the church. The children think he's funny, the adults just nod. He broke the rules, they say. That's what happens. Taxes are their own form of humiliation, because you don't just give what you owe, you must perform the giving. You walk to the collection point with your head bowed. You offer your grain, or eggs, or dried meat with 2 hands. You say, "My lord," or "my lady," or "God bless your house," even when the person you're speaking to is a pimply-faced teenager who's never seen a winter without mittens. And if you offer less than what they expect, you don't just lose food, you get shamed. They make you kneel in the square. They hang a sign around your neck. They announce your name in the church and call you a debtor. They tell the children to avoid your home. That family doesn't pay. And suddenly, your daughter has no friends. Your wife can't trade for salt. Your name becomes a warning. It is not enough that you are poor. You must also be guilty. Because guilt makes poverty easier to manage. If the poor believe they are failing, not failed, they won't rise. They'll stay obedient. They'll stay ashamed. And so they build rituals for you to play along with. When the Lord eats, he eats at a table, elevated, decorated, with cloth napkins and candlelight. The scraps are thrown to you, literally. You wait outside the hall during feast days. You kneel in the snow. A steward tosses bones and crusts out the window like you're a dog with a prayer. You don't complain. You say thank you. You say thank you for bones. Because otherwise you don't get bones at all. And this is how the hierarchy is maintained in winter. Not just by rules, but by rituals of humiliation. They make you watch. Watch the warmth. Watch the bread. Watch the laughter from behind glass. They make you bow. Not once, but daily. To titles. To robes. To rings. To firewood quotas. They make you apologize for your hunger. They make you explain your frostbite. They make you believe that your discomfort is the price of someone else's comfort. And if you resist, if you speak up, if you ask, why did I get fire while my baby coughs blood? You're called disloyal, ungrateful, dangerous, then punished, or worse, made an example of. So you stay quiet. You play your part. You scrape your knees when they pass. You thank them for the frost on your floor. You smile when they let you keep one turnip instead of none. You make your children say, "Sir," to the man who just took your last candle. Because that's how hierarchy survives winter. It teaches you to praise the very thing that's killing you. Eventually, you stop noticing the difference between doing things out of duty and doing them out of fear. You bow to the steward before he asks. You lower your eyes before he's in the room. You call the baron's daughter "my lady," even when she's younger than your youngest child, and once kicked your goat because it looked dirty. You don't choose humility anymore. It's become instinct, a kind of preemptive obedience, like flinching before the slap, like coughing before the cold sets in, like apologising before anyone blames you. You're trained. But worse, you've trained yourself. There is no overseer in your hut, no priest watching you eat, no bailiff counting your steps, and yet you still sit small, speak soft, hold the bread like it might shatter if you enjoy it too much. Your spine bends even when you're alone, because hierarchy doesn't need an audience. It just needs memory. Memory of who hurt you. Memory of who ignored you. Memory of what happened to the ones who forgot their place. You remember. And your body remembers. And now you don't need chains. Because you've become your own cage. Even around your own family. You don't speak as much to your children as you used to. Not because you don't love them. Because love is hard to show when your hands are cracked, your mind is frayed, and your face has forgotten how to soften. You worry that they'll copy your posture, that they'll inherit your deference like a family heirloom, that they'll flinch at laughter, or nod too deeply when a man in fur enters the room. Your son asks why the Lord gets to take half your grain. You pause. You want to tell the truth, because the truth is burning a hole in your gut like hunger on a holy day. But you lie. You say, because that's how it's always been. Not because it's right, because you're afraid he'll believe you if you say otherwise. And if he believes you, he might fight. And if he fights, he'll lose. and you'll lose him. So you lie, just like your father did, just like his father did. You lie to protect him, and in doing so, you teach him how to kneel. The worst part is, sometimes you look down too, not at your betters, at the people beneath you. Yes, there are people even poorer than you, even colder, even hungrier, even more broken. The man who lost his wife and now wanders barefoot in the snow. The old woman whose thatch roof collapsed and lives under a wheelbarrow with 3 chickens and a prayer. The girl who carries dung for a coin and never learned to speak above a whisper. And when you pass them, you feel something dark. Not pity, not solidarity, relief. At least I'm not them. And that thought, that small, quiet seed of superiority, is how the hierarchy stays alive. Because it gives even the lowest person someone to look down on. It divides you. Makes you compete for scraps instead of question who owns the loaf. Makes you shame each other instead of confront your shared humiliation. You see a man cry during tax collection and think, fool. You see a woman beg the priest for more wax and think, embarrassing. You hear someone whisper about rebellion and think, idiot. Not because you believe they're wrong, but because you're afraid they might be right. And if they're right, and the world really is this unjust, then everything you've done to survive in it becomes harder to justify. So you push them down with your thoughts. You mock. You judge. You smirk at the beggar. You look away from the sick. You step around the broken like you don't recognise yourself in them. That's hierarchy. Not just oppression, but division. It doesn't just put you below someone else. It makes you afraid of everyone above and below you. It turns community into suspicion. It turns suffering into competition. And it works. Because now, when someone else suffers, you don't feel solidarity. You feel distance. And when someone rises, gets more bread, better clothes, a favour from the Lord, you don't cheer. You feel betrayed. Why them? Why not me? That's the final victory of the social order. It's not that it makes you miserable, it's that it makes you miserable alone. Because if you ever realised how many others felt exactly like you, you might do something dangerous. You might ask a question too loud. You might stand too straight. You might reach for something warmer than survival. And that's not allowed, so you don't. You kneel. You watch. You whisper to your children, be careful. You make sure they understand. Some people have fires, we don't. Some people have voices, we whisper. Some people are warm, we kneel. There's a church in your village. It's made of stone. Old, cracked, cold, but holier than anything else you've ever seen. You know this because the priest says so. Every week, every sermon, every chance he gets. Inside, there are things you've never touched in your own home. Cloth that isn't stained, candles that stay lit, bread that's not mouldy, wine that burns instead of rots. And symbols, crosses, saints, icons of pain that somehow look cleaner than yours. Is beautiful and terrifying, because you know, deep down, that this is the place where your suffering is explained and justified. The priest doesn't speak like you do. He uses words in Latin, big ones, melting ones, words that slide over your ears like warm water before they freeze into guilt. He tells you that winter is a test, that your hunger is a trial of faith, that your obedience will be rewarded in the kingdom to come, that the frost on your skin is refining your soul like metal in the fire. And you believe him, because you have to. Because if there's not a reward waiting, if this is all there is, then you've been broken for nothing. So you sing the hymns. Quietly. Off-key. You kneel at the altar. Wincing when your knees hit the stone. You whisper confessions. Not because you sinned, but because clearly you must have. Why else would your fingers be blackening again? You believe that poverty is holy, that the meek shall inherit the earth, that the last shall be first, that your suffering isn't meaningless, it's sacred. The church tells you so. And the church is the only building with a roof that doesn't leak. Even its silence has weight. When the priest walks by your hut and doesn't nod, you feel it for days. You wonder what you did, who you offended, what part of God you mispronounced in your sleep. And when he smiles, it's worse. Because then you hope. You think, maybe this is the year things change. You tithe. You give what little you can. Grain, eggs, that single uncracked candle. Not because you want to. Because he tells you it's for your soul. And what's a candle compared to eternity? Sometimes the priest blesses you. A few drops of holy water on your forehead. It burns when it hits the frostbite. You don't flinch. Because a pain that comes from above feels purer, deserved, clean. And in that moment, when you're kneeling, starving, half frozen, and still grateful for the blessing, you realise something horrifying. You've been taught to worship the structure that's killing you. And worse, you think it's your only way out. Not through rebellion, not through fairness, but through endurance. If you suffer well, heaven. If you endure long enough, salvation. If you never ask why the church has warmth while you burn your furniture, if you never point out that your spiritual shepherd wears linen and dines with the Lord, then maybe you'll be rewarded when you die. Maybe, but not now. Now you kneel. Now you say thank you when they tell you that your child's fever is part of God's plan. Now you take communion with a cracked lip and tell yourself the blood of Christ tastes like mould and desperation. Now you recite a prayer and hope it keeps the snow out more than it keeps the guilt in. And you do this every week because it gives your pain structure. And structure feels like meaning. Even if that structure is a frozen ladder you were never meant to climb. You hear stories, whispered ones, about preachers in far-off towns who say the church is corrupt, that God doesn't want you to starve, that the bishop's wealth is blasphemy, that poverty is a system, not a sin. But those men disappear, or die, or stop being talked about. And the local priest reminds you gently that too many questions is a sign of spiritual decay, that rebellion leads to heresy, and heresy leads to fire. You've seen that fire. Once. Not a big one. Just a warning. A man accused of challenging church taxes, tied to a post. Just his shoes burned. Just enough to send a message. Faith is not a conversation. It is a hierarchy, and you are at the bottom. Even in the eyes of God. That's what winter teaches you too. That cold is divine. That suffering is sacred. That you, cold, filthy, starving, are exactly where you're supposed to be, because someone holier than you said so. And if you cry at night, keep it quiet. God hears, and he prefers the obedient kind. You're cold, you're hungry, you're poor, you're powerless, but none of those are your greatest danger. The real danger? That you might start thinking about it too clearly. So from the moment you can understand language, you are taught to wrap your misery in meaning. There is a rhyme for everything, a proverb for every pain, a story for every crack in your roof and blister on your hand. You grow up believing that the world is exactly as it should be, because the culture has been engineered to make your suffering feel like tradition. Take, for example, your songs. The ones you hum while you sweep, while you walk, while you pray. They are not protest songs. They are not ballads of rebellion. They are songs about sheep, about saints, about wheels turning and stars watching and rivers freezing for a reason. You sing about cold winds as if they're characters, friends, inevitable guests who simply come and go and who test your soul before spring returns. You sing about the Lord's feast, not with resentment, but with awe, as if it's a miracle that someone could eat that well, and not a crime that you don't. You sing about the priest's robe, as if it was sewn by angels. You don't sing about hunger. You sing about patience. You don't sing about pain. You sing about endurance. Because pain isn't something to question. It's something to outlast. Every elder, every neighbour, every tired mother stirring soup from bone water, they all reinforce the same sacred script. Life is hard. That's what makes it holy. You don't ask, why me? You ask, am I strong enough to endure what I must? This is cultural anaesthesia. It doesn't heal you. It just numbs you enough to keep moving. And it comes in many forms. Let's talk about folk stories. You know them. Everyone does. The man who complained about the cold and was turned into a tree. The girl who questioned the priest and coughed herself into a fever. The boy who left the village and was eaten by a wolf in a single bite. Just a single bite, like the wolf was doing the world a favour. These aren't just bedtime stories. They are moral scaffolding. And they hold up the roof of obedience, even when the real roof caves in. You tell these stories to your children, because they're the only thing you have to protect them from dangerous thoughts like, why is there always enough grain for the tithe, but not for us? Why does the priest wear boots while my feet bleed? Why do I burn the last of my roof while the manor burns candles during the day? Those thoughts lead to questions. Questions lead to defiance. And defiance gets frozen out. So you repeat the stories. And you believe them. Even when a small part of you doesn't. You believe them because believing them hurts less than admitting you're trapped. Then there are superstitions. Deep, irrational, inherited things. You don't whistle after dark. You don't speak a name more than 3 times. You tie twine around the ankles of your livestock to ward off frost spirits. You sleep with a spoon under your pillow to invite good dreams. You draw circles in the dirt before planting, not for the seeds, but for the blessings. Are these rituals real? You don't ask. You just do them, because ritual gives you control, and control is in short supply. If you draw a circle and your crop doesn't fail, that's proof it worked. If your child recovers from fever after you leave a piece of bread on the windowsill, that's a miracle. You can't explain why these things work. You just know that something has to, because if they don't, then it's just chaos. And chaos is colder than the snow. So the culture builds a house of ideas. Ideas that contain you, cradle you, keep you from screaming at the sky. They tell you that the world is full of spirits. The stars watch us and remember. If you suffer quietly, God notices. If you grumble, the frost will find you. If you lie in bed too long, death will think you're ready. These ideas are funny, beautiful, soothing, and devastating. Because they take your greatest power, your ability to say, no, this isn't fair, and twist it into a sin. And sin, in your world, is not just a mistake. It's a curse, a sickness, a hole in the roof of your soul. There's a saying in your village, too much laughter invites the wolves. You heard it as a child, You said it back before you even knew what it meant. It was said when someone joked too loud, when someone danced without reason, when someone smiled after sunset. But over time, you learned what it meant. It meant, don't get too happy, because the world listens, and the world does not like happy peasants. This is how winter shapes your culture, not just with suffering, but with the fear of joy itself. Not just the absence of warmth, the suspicion of it. Because if something good happens, a child recovers, a late rabbit gets caught, the roof patch holds, you do not celebrate. You thank something. Immediately. Loudly. Publicly. Praise be to St. Sebastian. God must be watching. The wind spirit passed us by. My grandmother's blessing must have held. The stars smiled for once. Because if you forget to say these things, something bad will happen next. You were taught this by everyone. The elder women, the priest, the man who makes candles from animal fat. Even your own mother whispered it in your ear after a small fire kept your soup warm. Shh! Don't say it's good. Say it's enough. That way it won't be taken. You internalized it. You learned to fear comfort, to downplay good fortune, to lower your voice when something warms your bones. Because hope is not virtue here. It's a temptation. The same goes for dreaming. You don't speak of travel. You don't speak of better futures. You definitely don't speak of towns where peasants wear shoes in winter, or where bread is sliced daily instead of scraped from a communal stone, like regret jam on bark toast. If someone says, I heard there's work in the city, people turn cold, because talk like that gets people noticed, and being noticed is dangerous. The last man who dreamed out loud about leaving, his name was Rogar, got visited by the steward within the week. Quiet visit, no accusations. Just a conversation that ended with Rogar nodding too much and coughing into a scarf that looked newer than usual. He never left. But a week later, his daughter was made to scrub the manor floor for a favour. No one spoke about it, except in silence, the way peasants do, because not dreaming has become part of the culture. You teach it to your children. You tell them not to reach toward the sky, because the sky is high and full of teeth. You tell them to be small, to stay quiet, to smile only for others, not themselves. Because any sign of joy is interpreted not as innocence, but as rebellion. Even the church enforces this. They may preach joy in the Lord, but when they say joy, they mean measured gratitude, not dancing, not laughter, not celebration. The only sanctioned joy is in ritual, the feast of a saint, the lighting of a candle, the birth of a child if the child does not cough for 2 weeks. Even the major religious festivals are tempered. On Christmas, the priest reminds you to be thankful, not indulgent. On Easter, you walk behind a man carrying a wooden cross in silence for an hour, not singing, not clapping, just watching him bleed from the head with artificial thorns as if to say, never forget, suffering is holy. And so, even in celebration, you're expected to perform restraint. There's a woman in your village, Elna, who once danced on Epiphany after drinking a cup of blessed wine. Nothing scandalous, just a quick skip, a flash of joy. A moment of footwork that looked like she remembered something better than winter. People gasped, the priest said nothing. But later, her father was made to donate his entire spring barley crop to the church as penance. That barley never made it to the poor. It was turned into communion wafers and priest bread and holy porridge. And Elna? She no longer dances. She doesn't even walk quickly. You see her sometimes, moving like cold sap down the path. Her eyes flicking left and right, like she's waiting for something bad to show up and balance the scales. Because that's another belief here. Balance always returns. If something good happens, something bad must follow. If your cow births twins, expect a fever. If your frostbitten finger heals, expect the chimney to collapse. If you catch 3 fish in winter, expect your neighbour to bury one of his children. No one questions this, they just nod, because it explains the randomness of suffering in a way that gives it shape. It turns cruelty into symmetry. It makes injustice feel fair, which is exactly what culture does here. It gives structure to your pain. Pain with a reason is easier to accept than chaos, and so they invent reasons, dozens of them. The snow fell because we forgot to light the candle for St. Elwyn. The roof caved in because the broom was placed bristle down. The baby cried because we spoke too loud near the hearth. The wolf came because someone walked with a feather in their hair. None of it's true, but all of it feels true, because it means that your actions matter, that your choices, even the smallest ones, influence the world, that you have power, even if that power is just saying thank you before the fire burns too well. And in a world where you control nothing, that illusion of power is everything. There's a certain kind of silence in a medieval village, not the peaceful kind, the listening kind, the kind where doors stay slightly ajar, where coughs are measured, where footsteps are tracked, where someone always seems to know just enough about your business to make you nervous, but not enough to be accused. This silence is not quiet. It's a form of control. Because while the nobility owns the land, and the church owns your soul, your neighbours own your reputation. And in a world this small, reputation is everything. You don't get second chances, you don't get privacy, you don't get to be weird, not even once. There's a word for that, actually. They call it strangeness. And strangeness is dangerous. Strangeness is stepping off the path to pick a herb no one else uses. Strangeness is fixing your roof differently than the others. Strangeness is staying inside on a feast day, or smiling too early after a death, or speaking fondly of your dreams. And when you do any of these things, people notice. They don't confront you. They talk about you. And in a village of 60 people, about becomes a verdict faster than law ever will. They whisper, "She's too quiet." He doesn't pray the same. Their stew always smells different. I saw her walking after dark. He talks to the dog like it's a person. No one tells you directly, you just feel it. The space around you shrinks. The barter lines grow longer when you're in them. The priest starts looking past you. Children stop playing near your door. It doesn't take long before your name is no longer your name. It becomes a rumour. Edric the Odd. Lena the Late. Tom who reads. Brana who laughs. And then you're marked. Not officially. There's no law, no record. Just a quiet consensus that you are no longer fully trusted. You can still trade, but expect worse deals. You can still work, but expect more scrutiny. You can still live, but don't expect anyone to mourn loudly when you don't. This is how culture enforces control in winter, not by violence, by exclusion. And the fear of that exclusion is worse than punishment, because it never ends. Public punishments, at least, have a beginning and an end. But when the community turns on you, there's no moment where the whip comes down and then stops. There's just ongoing denial of warmth, of voice, of humanity. And often it starts small. You forget to bow deep enough during procession. You mention that your child had a dream about a place with no snow. You sing a melody no one's heard before, and that's enough. Because culture isn't just tradition, it's expectation. And expectations become rules long before anyone agrees to them. There are entire rituals built around watching each other. Take the Sabbath inspection. That's not what they call it officially, but that's what it is. You attend church, every single person, every single Sunday, and you sit in rows. Not assigned, just known. You wear your best rags. You try to wash your hands, hide the cough, clean the child's nose, and people look, not just at you, at what you've failed to conceal. You're not just praying, you're displaying your respect, your discipline, your conformity. The sermon becomes background noise. The real mass is the eyes around you, tracking your posture, your tone, your silences. It's a performance. Everyone knows it. Everyone participates. And everyone remembers. Weeks later, someone will casually mention how your boy didn't kneel quickly enough, or how your wife sniffed when the priest spoke about suffering, or how your shoes were laced left over right. A pattern known to be used by heretics, apparently. That's the thing with culture in winter. Everything can be a symbol. A cough might mean sickness, but too much coughing, that might mean you're cursed. A red ribbon on a child might be protection, or it might be witchcraft. A smooth-talking traveller might be a gift from God, or a devil in boots, and no one's sure. So everyone becomes cautious, suspicious. You learn not to speak unless spoken to, not to tell jokes unless someone else laughs first, not to offer food unless you know exactly who will see you do it, not to visit neighbours too often, or not at all, depending on what week it is and what direction the wind came from when the chimney smoke turned sideways. Yes, that's a thing too. Some believe smoke that bends east means a family has sinned. Others think it means someone's hiding a secret, someone like you, and once that whisper starts, it spreads. Because people need stories. And the easiest story is always, someone among us has broken the order. Why? Because that means the order still exists. And if you believe the order exists, then your suffering has shape. But if it's all random, if the cold, the hunger, the rot, if all of that is just chance, then the silence becomes meaningless. Then the prayers are screams in an empty sky. Then the work is pointless. So they find a culprit. And the culprit is always the strange one. The one who doesn't flinch the same. The one who buries their dead with too many or too few candles. The one who says, I don't think the Lord has earned his tithes this year. That one. They're not one of us anymore. And if something bad happens after they say it, a crop failure, a fire, a fever, then it's confirmed. They caused it. So you do what's expected. You whisper too. You nod when the elder woman says, we should be careful around her. You step a little further from their hut. You add wood to your own fire, just in case their sin decides to travel. And you don't feel guilty. You feel safe. Because conformity in a village like this is not just survival. It's absolution. There's a point, and it comes slower than frostbite, quieter than snowfall, where you stop imagining. Not just stop dreaming, not just stop hoping. You stop even forming the thought that something else could be real. Not because you're too tired, not because you've been beaten, but because your mind has shrunk to fit the size of your world. And your world is one hut, one field, one church, one structure that has always been, and therefore must always be. You no longer say things like maybe. You say, that's just how it is. You say it about the Lord's taxes, You say it about the priest's demands. You say it about the sick child who won't see spring. You say it when the bread is mouldy, when the meat is maggoted, when the wind rips through the thatch like it's punishing you for sleeping. You don't call it injustice. You call it normal. And that's the final triumph of cultural control, when the suffering doesn't need to be enforced anymore, because you've named it life. You've taken the chains and called them roots. You've taken the silence and called it wisdom. You've taken your fear and carved it into heritage, so that when your children ask, "Why does the Lord take our flour?" you smile and say, "Because he protects us." When they ask, "Why can't we eat more on feast days?" you tell them, "Because we're not greedy like the wicked townsfolk." When they ask, "Why don't we leave?" you tell them, "Because this is where we belong. God placed us here." And you say these things with conviction, because the alternative, the possibility that it could be different, is unbearable. It would mean all this pain was not necessary. It would mean your entire life was spent enduring a lie. And so, instead, you choose comfort in the cage, not because you love it, because you no longer know how to hate it. Culture has done its job. It doesn't need guards. It doesn't need lashes. It doesn't need laws. It just needs a shared belief that this is the only way things can be. You've inherited that belief. You live inside it. You cook inside it. You cry inside it when no one is looking. You don't even hate the people above you anymore. You might, in passing, envy their fur-lined cloaks or the way they ride horses instead of walking through knee-deep sludge. But you don't resent them. You admire them. You call them noble. You say they are closer to God. You tell your children to bow lower than you ever did, because if they were born above you, they must be better. That's what belief does here. It doesn't just shape behaviour. It builds hierarchies into the soul. You even find yourself repeating things you once doubted. Some are born to rule. Some must suffer so others may lead. Obedience is a virtue. Humility is holy. You say them not because they're true. You say them because they're familiar. Because they're safe. Because they come with nods from neighbours and blessings from priests. Because they're easier than silence. Easier than truth. Easier than the unbearable scream that starts with, "What if this is all wrong?" But it's not just belief that has changed. You have changed. Your hands, once strong from work, now shake from cold and memory. Your back aches in the exact same spot your father's did. Your voice is quieter now. Measured. Appropriate. Never too bold. Never too curious. You don't hum to yourself anymore. You don't ask questions at supper. You don't mention that dream you had where the fields were green and the bread was endless and no one told you where to kneel. You don't tell anyone that dream, because even in your mind it feels dangerous, so you lock it away, like the candle stub you hide for emergencies, like the dry wood under the bed you guard for the next storm, like the memory of your mother's laughter, back when you thought that maybe, just maybe, the world could be kind. That's how belief survives here. Not by shouting, not by miracles, not even by faith, but by forgetting. By slowly forgetting anything that could threaten it. Forgetting warmth. Forgetting rebellion. Forgetting that there are places, real or imagined, where no one bows unless they choose to. And that forgetting, it feels like peace. Because when you forget, you stop reaching. And when you stop reaching, the pain dulls. The questions fade. The hunger becomes routine. The silence becomes sleep. And sleep. Sleep is the only comfort culture never took from you. Because even the most obedient peasant still dreams. They just don't tell anyone. Here's the thing they don't tell you when you're a kid growing up in medieval winter. Sometimes you survive by accident. Not through strength, not through skill, not even through prayer, but through pure, absurd, inconvenient chance. Like the time your neighbour Willem tripped into the dung pit and didn't get up for 2 minutes. And somehow, that fall saved his life, because the wolf pack came through town 3 minutes later and didn't smell him. Or the time old Anselm dropped a boiled onion into the snow and had to chase it for 15 yards, only to come back and find his entire roof collapsed where he had just been standing. No one calls these miracles. They just call them winter logic. Because in medieval winter, nothing makes sense. Let's talk about your body. You've already been freezing. That's standard. But now you're entering the next stage, losing track of your own parts. Fingers? Questionable. Toes? Hypothetical. Ears? Pure memory. You've reached that magical threshold where you can't tell whether you're numb or just not there anymore. Your hands no longer feel like tools. They feel like props. You drop things constantly. Spoons, knives, hope. Your nose drips so much you've stopped wiping it. That rag you carried? Frozen stiff. It could take out someone's eye if you threw it hard enough. Frostbite is now a community topic. Everyone compares wounds like war veterans. Got my left thumb black this time. Elna's foot makes that hollow sound now, like she's walking on wood. Rogan's ear came off when he pulled his hood off too fast. No one screams anymore. It's all just noted. You normalise it. Because if you scream every time something goes wrong in winter, you'll never stop screaming. Let's talk about the food situation, which is to say, the not food situation. By midwinter, the preserved meat is either mouldy or moved in ways it shouldn't. The pickled vegetables have gone gelatinous. The bread? You're not sure it's still bread. It's grey and alive if left near warmth for more than an hour. So you make stew. Stew is generous. What you make is brownish water, vaguely thickened, made of things you do not name aloud. Tree bark. Rat tail. Whatever the goat dropped last week. The rind from a wheel of cheese that expired when your grandmother was still alive. You eat it slowly. Not because it's hot, but because chewing too fast might dislodge a tooth. Your teeth are already a nightmare. Crumbling, cracking, screaming at the cold. You've started chewing only on the left side, or the right, whichever side hurts less this week. And then there's snow. Not snow as weather. Snow is a daily threat. Because snow isn't just cold, it's strategic. It waits until you patch the hole in your roof, then collapses it again. It finds your driest wood and soaks it in comedy. It covers your door in the night so you wake up trapped. You have to dig out of your house with a piece of firewood that was once a chair leg. You've named the snowbank outside. You've made enemies with it. You think it watches you. That's normal. Most people in your village talk to objects by February. You greet your favourite rock. You avoid eye contact with the well. You suspect the broom is conspiring against you. This is not madness, it's companionship. Because the snow doesn't talk back. But at least it doesn't judge. Now let's talk about illness. Not just the typical fevers, which are always around. No, let's talk about the strange ones. The mystery rashes. The winter bloats. The cough that sounds like two people fighting in your chest. There's no doctor. The priest might have a few oils. A prayer. A string of Latin you try to believe in. Your neighbour offers birch water and hot stones, which works exactly as well as wishing. So when your cousin swells up and begins speaking in rhyme for 3 days, you don't panic. You write it down. You think, maybe this will happen to me next. And you try to figure out whether it's better to swell and rhyme, or shrivel and cough. Either way, the end result is the same: burial in frozen dirt. Which, fun fact, can't be dug during real winter. So you bury bodies in shallow snow graves, or store them in sheds until thaw. Yes, there are corpse sheds, sometimes they're official, sometimes they're that empty barn nobody uses. Either way, it means by March you've walked past 7 frozen corpses more than once while trying to find a chicken. You nod politely, because the dead aren't scary. They're quiet. They don't ask for food. They don't steal firewood. They don't judge your stew. In fact, you talk to them too, because everyone needs someone who listens, even if they're technically decomposing. Let's begin with your animals. You love them. You need them. And they absolutely do not care about you. Your goat is smarter than you, and she knows it. She stares through you when you talk. She kicks over her own trough and watches you clean it. She once ate your only surviving sock and then gave you that look like, "What are you going to do about it, worm?" You depend on her for milk, but the joke's on you. She only gives milk when she feels emotionally supported. So now, in addition to keeping yourself alive, you have to keep a passive-aggressive goat emotionally validated. You sing to her. You warm her stall. You apologise when you raise your voice near her. Still, no milk. She's winning. Then there's the chickens. You used to have 12. You now have 5. 3 were stolen by a fox. 1 vanished into snow like a cartoon gag. Another was eaten by your neighbour, who insists she found it already dead. You didn't argue. You were too tired. And also, you'd probably have done the same. The surviving 5 are evil. Beady-eyed, feathered demons. They peck at your fingers when you reach for eggs. They peck at your boots when you walk too slowly. One of them, the big one with the limp, has started standing on your doorstep like he's daring you to leave the house. You name him Sir Edmund, and you fear him more than wolves. Speaking of wolves, they're always nearby. Not visible, just implied. Their howls echo at night. Sometimes close, sometimes impossibly far. The sound bends through the trees like a threat written in air. You don't know how many there are. You don't want to know. You just know they're hungry, always. And the unspoken rule is, they get someone. Every winter, someone. A child too slow. A man who stayed at the tavern past dusk. A woman collecting water who never came back. The village doesn't panic when it happens. They just nod, say, the wolves were owed. As if predators have payment schedules. Now let's talk about household chores. The most dangerous part of your day. Yes, not wolves, not starvation. Chores. Because winter doesn't just make things harder, it makes them comically fatal. Want to clean the floor? Congratulations. You've just slipped on your own spit and hit your head on a beam that's been hanging low since Charlemagne. Want to dump the chamber pot? You step outside, barefoot because your shoes are frozen, and suddenly you're ice skating across a manure glacier while holding a bucket of your entire family's digestive regret. You fall, you spill it, you cry. But only on the inside, because tears freeze your eyelashes and blind you. Want to stir the stew? Hope you didn't lean too close. The pot cracked last week, and now leaks from the bottom, which means the fire steams your ankles until your shins are 2 blistered regrets wrapped in linen and shame. Want to sit down? You grab the stool. You sit. It collapses. Why? Because the leg was rotted from the inside out. Like your hope. And now your tailbone is broken, you're covered in ash, and the goat is watching. Silently. Judging. There's a man in your village who died trying to open a stuck door. He pushed. He slipped. He hit the edge of the table. His skull cracked like a thawing melon. He bled into the soup. People still ate the soup because it was warm. And warmth trumps dignity every time. No one even talks about it with shame. They just say, "Old Bren died making the stew good." And somehow that becomes a proverb. Want another one? Don't eat the yellow snow. Of course not. But do eat the grey snow. The one packed under the firewood, where the chickens sleep, next to the axe that's now too dull to use. That snow is clean enough. There's a child who ate only melted icicles for 3 days and stopped blinking. Just stopped. Now she stares all the time, and occasionally recites the Lord's Prayer backwards. No one knows what to do about her. She's not ill. She's just different now. So they keep her near the church, just in case she starts glowing, or floating, or announcing the second coming of St. Elwyn, patron of frostbitten tongues. Let's move on to clothing mishaps. Clothes kill people, really. Not because they're dangerous, because they don't do anything at all. You wear 3 tunics, a pelt of some animal you didn't identify properly, and a wool cap that was once your sister's baby blanket. Still cold. And if anything gets wet, that's a death sentence. People are frozen trying to dry their sleeves. They've collapsed from the weight of frozen pants. They've gotten stuck, literally frozen into position, while trying to relieve themselves in the snow. One man had to be chiselled loose by his wife. Their marriage never recovered. There's a woman who burned her leg standing too close to the fire, but refused to move because the other side was still cold. She said, "Let it blister. At least it's something." And that phrase, it's become common. People say it when they get splinters from the church pew, when their knees bleed through their trousers, when they step on a nail buried in ice and limp home singing a hymn. Let it blister. At least it's something. That's winter's motto. Not survival, not victory. Just something. You wake up to scratching on the roof. Too slow for wind. Too soft for snow. Too regular for accident. You don't check. You've stopped checking. Because if it's a branch, it'll stop. If it's a raccoon, it'll leave. If it's something else, you'd rather not know. Your neighbour once climbed his roof to check on a sound like that. He didn't come down. They found his boot lodged between 2 slats, frozen upright like a salute to curiosity. They didn't dig further. They just blessed the roof and boarded the door. He's still in there, probably. You pass that hut every week and pretend it's not watching you. Because some buildings go bad. Everyone knows that. Too cold, too empty, too long, and a hut starts whispering to itself, creaking in rhythm, snapping wood without wind. When a house groans like that, you don't fix it. You move away. If you're lucky. If not, you keep living inside it. You start answering the groans. You say, "Yes, I heard it too." "No, I won't tell them." "Yes, I'll stay quiet." No one admits this, but they understand. Because winter gets inside everything, even your mind. Let's talk about illnesses with no name. There's one where your fingertips tingle, then burn, then turn blue. You call it snowfire. There's one where your dreams go wrong. Vivid, wild, crawling things. You wake up screaming and then keep screaming. Days at a time. You call it the voice fever. Then there's sack chest. When breathing feels like someone dropped a potato sack on your lungs and just left it there. None of these are studied. There's no treatment. You just give them names and wait. Hope they pass. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they take people sideways. Not dead, not alive, just wrong. There's a man named Brannick who went outside one night, barefoot, during a snowstorm. Not for firewood, not for help. Just walked out. He came back in the morning with pine needles in his mouth and no memory of the last 7 hours. Now he won't enter churches. Won't eat anything warm. Says the cold showed him something and that it's not done speaking. You stop inviting Brannick to supper, but you still leave a bowl by the door, just in case whatever he saw decides to be polite. The forest too starts acting strange. You've always feared it, that's normal. But now, it seems to shift. Paths vanish. Trees you knew since childhood stand wrong, closer together or in odd spirals. You find footprints leading nowhere. You hear birds singing in the dead of night. Once, a child followed a sound like bells into the woods and came back hours later, smiling and unable to speak. You say, "The forest is hungry." You don't mean that metaphorically. You really think it eats. There's no logic in that. But there's comfort. Because if the forest is hungry, then maybe it's satisfied after taking someone else. You start seeing things in the snow. Shapes. Letters. Symbols you didn't put there. Once you saw a spiral around your hut. Perfect circle. Carved into the snow like something traced it from the sky. You asked your wife, she hadn't seen it. But she wouldn't step outside the rest of the day. You didn't talk about it again, because talking makes things real. Just like the snowman someone built next to your goat shed. You didn't build it. Your children didn't build it. Your wife definitely didn't build it. She's scared of anything with a face these days. But there it was, rough, wide, button eyes you've never owned, a scarf that smelled like someone else's chimney. You didn't destroy it, you just avoided it for 3 days, until it melted, and you found a dead rat inside. You told yourself it must have crawled in. You know that's not how freezing works, but you tell yourself anyway, because sometimes truth is colder than fear. You see shapes in the fire now. Not logs, not embers, figures. One night you swear the smoke spelled your name. You blinked. Gone, but still. You moved your bedroll further from the hearth that night. People say the priest has a mirror that reflects sin. No one has seen it, but everyone believes it's real. They say if you stare into it and see a blank face, you're clean. If you see someone else's face, you're cursed. If you see yourself, but smiling, run. These stories spread because they're easier to believe than random suffering. Because if the fire whispers your name, maybe it's a sign. If the wind cries like a child, maybe it's a warning. If the snow turns black, maybe it's your fault. And if it's your fault, that means it's not chaos. And anything is better than chaos, even punishment, even doom. Because at least those things have structure. You know it's bad when the jokes start. Not the festive kind. The winter jokes. The ones that sound like curses, but end in a shrug. Well, at least the lice keep me warm. If I fall through the ice, tell my wife I hated her stew. No teeth, no bread. Problem solved. If the wolf comes, I'll just marry it. Better listener than Gregor anyway. These jokes aren't meant to make people laugh. They're pressure release valves. Because once you've eaten boiled shoe leather soaked in fire ash, watched your shadow move differently than your body, and had a conversation with a goat who may or may not be the reincarnation of your aunt, You need to laugh, or you die. Sometimes both. There's an old man in your village, Herwin. He's got no fingers left. Lost them in a blizzard years ago while trying to tie his boots. Now he just bangs his wrists together and calls it clapping. Every time someone mentions spring, he shouts, "Don't believe in that pagan lie!" Everyone laughs, because spring is a myth. You say it's coming. You mark the days. You pretend the light is returning. But deep down, no one believes it. You joke about it the way sailors joke about land. The whole village runs on this weird mutual delusion that spring will save you, that warmth is real, that food grows in dirt instead of barrels and prayer. But secretly, you believe the snow is permanent, that the world was always like this, that hell isn't below, it's around, white, quiet, patient. So you laugh. You laugh at your own frostbite. You call your blackened toes little monks. You name your frost-numb hand Sir Tinglesworth. You make up songs about your chilblains and sing them off-key while chopping wood that will never burn properly anyway. Your cousin died last week. Fell asleep next to the fire, or what passed for a fire, and didn't wake up. The next morning someone said, "He finally found a warm place." You all nodded. No one cried. Someone chuckled. It wasn't cruel. It was relief. Because death means the end of waiting. And waiting, in this season, is the worst part. Waiting for the snow to stop. Waiting for your skin to dry. Waiting for the stew to not taste like regret. Waiting for the priest to stop quoting Job. Waiting for your thoughts to stop circling the same drain. Waiting for someone, anyone, to say, "It doesn't have to be like this." But no one says that, so you joke, because laughter is the only rebellion left. You joke about building a house on top of a snowbank. You joke about marrying your own shadow, because it stays closer than your spouse. You joke that if the devil came to collect your soul, he'd freeze before reaching your door, and leave a note asking for better insulation. You joke about God's sense of humour, giving humans sweat glands and then locking them in permanent frost. You joke that the wolves should just take the village and govern it. They couldn't do worse. You joke that the church should start selling indulgences in exchange for firewood. You joke that maybe the snowman behind the goat shed is your real father. Come back to check your homework. You joke that the only miracle you've seen this year was when the mould on your bread formed a perfect circle, and someone swore it was the halo of St. Felix the Flatulent. You joke that your coffin is already halfway built, because it's just your bed, colder and slightly deeper. You joke that when you die, the only thing that will mourn you is your lice colony. And still, you wake up every day, you sit up, hear the creaking of your spine, the soft groan of the wind through the holes in your wall, and you think, one more day in this godless snow globe. And then you do the stupid, impossible thing. You stand, you bundle up, you greet the goat, you check the roof, you stir the ashes, you make stew. Again. You eat it. Again. You look out the door and see white, endless white, and you say, could be worse, could be raining. And you mean it, because this is the final, beautiful, insane twist of medieval winter. You endure, not with dignity, not with hope, not even with belief, but with sarcasm, with curses, with gallows humour and a frostbitten grin. The horror doesn't end, the absurdity doesn't make sense, but you keep going anyway, because that's all anyone's ever done. You keep laughing because it hurts less than screaming. You keep walking because standing still is colder. You keep living because, well, you haven't stopped yet, and somehow that's enough. There's a morning you don't want to wake up. Not in a dramatic way. Not like the saints in stories. No lightning, no ghosts, no whispered prophecies from the firewood. Just a quiet. No. You open your eyes and the first thing you feel isn't cold. It's dread. Because you know what's coming. Not because anything new will happen, but because nothing new will happen. Same frost on the wall. Same half-burned log in the hearth. Same sagging roof beam. Same coughing child. Same stew that tastes like boiled apologies. You pull the blanket closer. It's not warm, but it's the only thing that hasn't abandoned you. You stare at the ceiling. You think, is this it? Just more. You try to count how many days of winter you've survived. You can't. Not because it's too many, because it's all the same day, over and over, stacked like splinters in the back of your mind. You've forgotten what warmth feels like. Not temperature, safety. You're never relaxed, never unworried, never still in a way that feels earned. Even sleep is nervous. You dream of food and wake up biting your tongue. You dream of light and wake up squinting into blackness. You dream of voices and wake up gasping, only to realise it was your own breath echoing off cold stone. And worst of all, you dream of before winter, before you stopped hoping, before the cold moved into your bones like a tenant you can't evict. Those dreams are dangerous, because they give you just enough memory to hurt, and then take it away. There's no one to talk to about this. Not really. The village is close, yes, but not open. Everyone carries the same weight, and no one wants to admit they're tired of holding it. If you say, I don't want to keep going, someone will say, then don't, just do. And that's not comforting. It's not advice. It's proof that they've given up too. You watch people move like ghosts during the day, mouths tight, eyes forward, fingers clenched around routines that keep them from screaming. You hear a woman weeping in the forest once, not sobbing. Just this soft, leaking sound, like something inside her cracked and never stopped dripping. You didn't approach, not because you didn't care, because you knew she just stopped crying when she saw you. Wipe her face. Say, I'm fine. And go back to whatever it is we're all pretending to be fine for. There are no words for this kind of exhaustion. No saints for it. No prayers that work. You try them anyway. You kneel, even when your knees scream. You fold your hands, even when they're shaking. You whisper the Latin, even though you barely know what it means. You say, God, if you see me, please make this end. Not death, just the cold, just the waiting, just this endless hour when nothing changes and still somehow gets worse. The priest says, God tests those he loves. You don't believe him. You think God forgot this village, or maybe he left on purpose. You wonder if you do the same. If you were God, would you stay? Would you watch these bent-backed, frost-bitten people shuffle through slush and hunger just to keep a system running that no longer knows why it exists? Would you look at a child with bone-thin arms and a toothless smile and think, yes, this is holiness? Or would you look away? Like you do now, when the child begs for a second bowl of broth, and you say, there's none left. Even though there is. You're just too scared to share it. You weren't always like this. You remember being generous once. When someone needed wood, you gave it. When a neighbour's roof collapsed, you helped. When the goat gave twins, you offered milk. But winter changes that. Winter makes greed feel like virtue. Because it's not just about survival anymore. It's about making it to next week without losing your soul entirely. And if someone else has to go without so you can stay whole, you look away. just like everyone else. And that's what haunts you. Not the cold, not the hunger, the looking away. Because it happens every day. When the elder slips and no one runs to help. When the orphan steals bread and no one stops him. But no one invites him either. When someone dies and people nod, say shame, and move on before the body's cold. You wonder, is this who I am now? And the honest answer is yes. Because survival doesn't ask who you want to be. It just asks who you're willing to become to keep going. And the answer, every time, is whatever it takes. Let's talk about grief. Not the kind with candles and cloaks. Not the church bells. Not the Latin murmurs. Not the rehearsed sorrow that priests wear like another robe. No. Let's talk about the real thing. The one that doesn't fit in ritual. The kind that comes when you lose someone and don't have time to stop. Because the snow keeps falling. Because the stew still needs stirring. Because the woodpile is too low. And the hut roof groans more every night. So when your cousin dies from a fever that cooked his brain in 3 days, you do not weep. You say he was tired. You say God needed him. You say at least it was quick. You say all these things not because you believe them, but because they're the only sentences that keep the fire lit. Grief is a luxury. Mourning is for rich people and poets. You have chores. You have children. You have neighbours counting your shovelfuls of snow to make sure you're still doing your share. So you stuff the sorrow down like bad stew, thick, bitter, unfinished. You don't talk about it again. You don't even say his name out loud. Because to say it will be to invite the ache back. And there's no space left in your chest. It's already full of other things, like fear, like fatigue, like the terrifying suspicion that you might not care anymore. And that's worse than sadness. Because at least sadness meant you felt something. Now, you just feel function. You feel like a pot that never boils, a door that never opens, a song no one remembers how to finish. Your face? Neutral. Your voice? Flat. Your eyes? Used to seeing suffering like a routine. A child limping from frostbite? Standard. A man coughing blood into his sleeve? Wednesday? A woman burying her third son and not even sitting down after? Expected. And the worst part? You respect that. You say she's strong. But what you mean is she's broken in the right way. And you wish you were that kind of broken too. The kind that doesn't leak. The kind that just keeps moving. Because stillness is dangerous. When you sit too long, the memories catch up. The sound of voice you haven't heard in months. The smell of bread that no one bakes anymore. The warmth of a touch you've gone too long without. And suddenly, you're not numb. You're raw. And raw is unbearable. So you get up. You sweep the same corner twice. You pretend you forgot something outside and go out into the snow just to make your legs ache again. Because pain is better than memory. Pain is active. It keeps you here. It gives you a reason to not lie down and stay down. You've seen people give up. They don't shout. They don't declare anything. They just slow down. One man stopped eating. Not because there wasn't food, but because he stopped feeling hungry. Another woman forgot her own name. When someone called her, she looked confused, then scared, then nothing. The priest said she was possessed. But you know better. She was just empty. So empty even identity gave up. And you worry that's happening to you. You used to hum. Now you don't. You used to notice birds. Now it's just sound. You used to look forward to feast days, even if they were grim. Now the calendar is just a circle of grey. No peaks, no valleys, no difference. You can't even remember the last time someone touched you out of affection. You get touched, yes, during communion, during chores, during a rare village task. But not because they wanted to, not because they missed you. And that does something to you. Something quiet. Something cruel. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who could be missed. You become utility. An object with chores. A mouth that eats only when rationed. A presence noted but not named. And maybe that's the worst part. Not the cold, not the hunger, not the pain. But the idea that if you vanished, the village would simply redistribute your duties. She's gone? Then someone else will chop the wood. We'll take a goat. Give a corner to the widow. No memorial, no stories, just reallocation. And that makes you afraid in a new way. Not fear of dying, but fear of dying without ever having been seen. So sometimes, just sometimes, you act out. You sing a line too loud. You walk in a direction you're not supposed to. You wear the red shawl you've been told is too proud. And someone notices. Their eyes narrow. Their mouth tightens. And you feel that old warmth rise up. The one that says, "You're still in there." But it doesn't last. Because you still have to eat. You still have to stay inside the lines. You still have to keep the stew from burning. So the next day, you apologise. You go back to grey, to quiet, to unremarkable, and everyone lets you. Because everyone knows you can't afford a personality in winter. It's too heavy to carry. At some point, you stop being a person, and you start being a shape. A shape that wakes up. A shape that shovels. A shape that says yes when told. A shape that moves through the village without colour, without noise, without questions. People still talk to you, but not with you. They speak at you, around you, through you, and you reply, like an echo. You become efficient. That's the word that fits. You answer quickly. You fetch what's needed. You don't offer extras, not warmth, not conversation, not resistance. People appreciate it. They say you're reliable. They say you're stable. But no one says you're missed. No one says you feel like anything. You are, in every way, the perfect version of a winter survivor. Quiet, compliant, predictable, forgettable. And it works. You're safer now. No one asks if you're well. No one notices when you skip supper. No one watches too closely when you stare at the fire for hours without blinking. Because this is the deal winter makes. Stop needing, and you get to keep going. And you take it. Because needing hurts. Because hoping costs energy you don't have. Because no one else around you is daring to want anything more than what's in front of them. You stop speaking in full sentences. You stop asking names. You stop wondering how long it's been since the last thaw. You don't even flinch when someone dies. You just make room. And it's not that you're cruel. You just can't carry any more people inside your memory. You already carry too many ghosts. People who used to laugh. People who used to make things. People who used to talk about stories from the cities beyond the woods. Stories you didn't believe, but loved anyway. They're gone now, and you're still here. Which means you lost. Because staying means absorbing. Every death gets folded into your silence. Every loss gets stitched into your stillness. Every betrayal, every ration withheld, every word unsaid, gets pressed into your spine until your back won't straighten anymore. You stop trying to remember what your voice sounds like when it isn't afraid. You stop wondering what your face used to look like when someone else loved it. You stop counting the days because numbers imply there's an end. And the truth is, you've forgotten what you're even surviving for. Your future isn't real. There's no plan, no path, no dream. There's only tomorrow, and whether or not you'll have to choose between warmth or food again. You no longer imagine escape, not even in fantasy, not even at night. Because imagining an escape means imagining a self that could deserve it. And you don't believe in that self anymore. That self was someone who cared about music, who liked jokes, who carved initials into wood just to feel like time noticed. That person's gone. You are what's left. A set of working limbs. A heartbeat strong enough to keep the bucket moving. A name that only gets said when something needs lifting, fixing, or burying. Even the children have stopped looking at you with wonder. They used to ask questions. Used to giggle when you made faces. Used to tug on your sleeves when the world scared them. Now they pass you like furniture, like a post in the road. Like the well, useful but unloved. And you don't blame them, because you've been teaching them the same lesson you were taught. Don't need. Don't ask. Don't remember. Just keep moving. And that lesson works. They'll survive, but they won't live. And maybe that's what winter is, really. Not the cold, not the starvation, not even the death, but the slow, quiet convincing of an entire village that being alive is a risk not worth taking. There comes a moment, not all at once, not dramatic, when you stop saying I. You don't notice it right away. You're just telling a story, helping with the stew, talking to a child who still thinks words can solve anything. You say, "We used to walk, Father. We lost another goat. We'll see what the weather does." And someone asks, "Who's we?" You don't answer. Because the truth is, you don't know. You've dissolved. The line between yourself and the world, the frost, the fear, the silence, the soot, has been rubbed away by routine, exhaustion, and repetition. You no longer imagine yourself as a point in space. You're just a motion, a part of the village, a thing that turns like the wheel, like the fire, like the bucket at the well. You speak less now, not because there's nothing to say, but because the space between your thoughts and your mouth has grown too wide. It's hard to reach across. Harder still to care what's on the other side. So you settle into gesture. A nod, a shrug, a look that means, "I heard you," or "Yes, it's bad," or "I'll go if no one else will." Words become too heavy, especially the big ones. Hope? Enough. Better? Why? Those words don't fit in your mouth anymore. They sound like lies. Like spring songs sung by someone who's never watched frost take a baby's breath. So you don't use them. Instead you use words like maybe, if, still, almost. You don't say "I love you." You say "be careful." Get inside. Eat something. These are the languages of collapse. Gentle evacuations of meaning. Soft exits from emotion. You remember being in love once. You think. You remember a face. The way the hand felt in yours. The way you talked about leaving. Not seriously, but as a game. Just saying, what if? Just enough to feel like choice was still a thing you had. That person is gone. Not dead, maybe. Just absorbed. Like you. Maybe you see them sometimes. Maybe they nod. Maybe you pass like strangers. Not because of a fight. Because the cold made you both simpler. Simpler people don't fall in love. They align, they coordinate, they share space and blankets and food. But they do not risk each other. Risk is for people who believe the future might be different. You don't believe in the future. You believe in the next 10 minutes. Anything beyond that is science fiction. You once had a dream about a fire that stayed lit all night. You cried when you woke up. Not because it wasn't real, but because it had felt true. And true is rare now. Most things are just acceptable. Your life is acceptable. Your silence is acceptable. Your decay is acceptable. No one notices you're smaller. Not physically, though you are. The hunger sees to that, but inside. Your thoughts don't wander like they used to. You don't remember smells, or colours, or songs. You don't think in pictures anymore, just in tasks. And the wildest part, you're not angry. You thought you'd be furious. You thought when the collapse came it would be loud. But it's not. It's peaceful. Like finally lying down after carrying a heavy sack for too long. You don't cry. You don't scream. You don't beg. You just go quiet. You become the part of the village that no one talks about, but everyone relies on. You're the one who fixes the door, who stirs the coals at midnight, who sharpens the knife and says, "This will have to do." No one celebrates you. No one thanks you. No one names their child after you. But that's fine, because you've let go of that part. The part that needed to be known, remembered, felt. Now you just drift. You're not dead. You're not alive. You're something in between. A keeper of winter, a ghost in motion, a part of the machine that keeps the cold from winning. And maybe that's holy. Not in the way priests mean, but in the way a flame is holy. Or a blanket, or a silence deep enough to hold back the dark. Because someone has to endure, and it might as well be you. The wind outside is quieter now, not because it stopped, just because you've stopped hearing it. Or maybe you've just heard it too long to care. The fire flickers once, like it's trying to remember how to be alive, and then it doesn't. You lie down, not to sleep, not to rest, just to be horizontal for a while. The blanket feels the same as always, scratchy, stiff, not enough. But now even that is something. Your breath fogs the air, then vanishes. You don't follow it. You stay, still, small, soft at the edges. Someone coughs in the distance. A pot creaks on a hook. A chicken shifts its weight. And the cold hums. That old familiar hum, the one you've known your whole life. It doesn't want anything. It doesn't threaten. It just waits, like you. So you close your eyes and let the last bit of you, the one that still remembered warmth or joy or spring, go quiet. The fire is out and the dark is kind.